o'clock, so I will open our meeting. Welcome to everybody who is present. We are live streaming this meeting via the City of Hobart YouTube channel. And so for the purposes of recording, if you can wait till I have announced you before speaking. We have no apologies tonight and no leave of absences. We do have a number of directors online, including the CEO, Ms Grigsby is online, and I think a couple of other directors are online tonight. So if we do need questions from Mr Noy or Ms Allen, they are also there if there are any questions required. Okay, so just to start with, I would like to acknowledgement to country in recognition of the deep history and culture of this place. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which the City of Hobart was built and acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and rights. The minutes of our last meeting you have, it was from the 30th of May. Would someone like to move those? Councillor Sherlock's moved them, Councillor Dutta has seconded them. All those in favour of the minutes as they are? Say aye. Against? It's carried unanimously. Transfer of agenda items. Are there any agenda items to be transferred? The open or the closed, or the closed to the open? There being none, we'll move on now to no communications from myself. Notification of council workshops there was one on the 7th of June on the 2022-23 budget, and there were 9 elected members present at that workshop. Public question time, we do not have any members of the public here that I can see, so I don't think we have any, but we do have some responses. Would someone like to move those? Chair. Moved by Deputy, seconded by Alderman Barakas. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 6 is petitions. We do have one petition, and I'm going to ask Mr Doyle to read it out to us.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We have a petition submitted by Professor Pamela Sharp, a petition to request an elector poll into the relocation of University Tasmania's campus from Sandy Bay into the Hobart Central Business District. The proposal by the University of Tasmania to relocate its campus from Sandy Bay into Hobart Central Business District is the subject matter of this petition. Pursuant to Section 60 of the Local Government Act 1993, we, the undersigned electors of the City of Hobart, call on the Hobart City Council to hold an elector poll asking the following question. Do you support the University of Tasmania's proposal to relocate the Sandy Bay campus into Hobart Central Business District, yes or no? The total number of signatures, Lord Mayor, is 1,204.
Alderman Briscoe is up first.
I move that we accept the petition and send it to the appropriate committee for consideration.
Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Supplementary items? We have none. Okay. Are there any indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest for any of the items on the agenda tonight? There being none, we will now move on to item the City Planning Committee, and I'll invite, we are now acting as a planning authority, and I'll invite Alderman Barakas to introduce those items for us. Item 9.1.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Item 9.1 is for 209-213 Harrington Street. The applications for new building for food services, signage, subdivision and associated works. I'll move that, Lord Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. Would anyone like to speak to this matter? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no.
Aye.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Sorry, Lord Mayor. Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Coates. It's carried, Lord Mayor, 10 votes to 2.
Item 9.2.
Thank you,
Alderman
Lord.
Brockus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll move item 9.2, 136.
Second by Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. 136 Wentworth Street and 112 Cascade Road and 106 Cascade Road, South Hobart for temporary housing. And the recommendation is that the council approve the application for temporary housing at the aforementioned address and issue the permit.
Okay, any discussion? This is an extension of an existing program. No discussion? Can I just ask one question, if I may? I have had a few representations from the community about that everyone supports the project, but that it did basically cut off an existing public pathway across the bottom of Wellesley Oval. I don't know whether any of the directors is able to advise on whether that can be, now that this looks as though it's going to be much more permanent, because I said to people, well, it's temporary, but if this is, whether that can be investigated at all?
Mr. Noy might be able to
Mr.
assist.
Noy?
Yeah, this is a fairly limited extension to next year, but I'll certainly take that on notice and raise it with the relevant officers to see if we can re-establish that access.
So sorry, Mr. Noy, so it's just a 1 year extension, or it is 2 years?
I think it's 2 years in total, but it's to the middle of next year, as I understand it, to 2023. So in effect, it's 1 year from now.
Thank you. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, just on that, Mr. Lord Mayor, and I wasn't at the committee meeting, but so is that pathway, it's not a part of the conditions in relation to this, or is it referred off to the Parks and Recreation Committee for consideration?
Yeah. So I think Mr. Noy is just going to take it on notice and maybe provide some advice back on it.
Yeah, will do, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
All right, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. That's carried unanimously. Item 9.3.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll move item 9.3, 1 Bell Street, Newtown, upgrading of existing telecommunication facility.
Second by Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is pretty much just to upgrade an existing telecoms tower. And generally, it's quite routine. There was a deputation that we heard in committee from an individual concerned about the EMF radiation of the works and the new technology that's going in there. And there was some consideration of that, but ultimately that's an issue that's covered by federal EM regulations. And not something that's within our discretion to really discuss. So there was some questions about, given that this is on council land, what responsibility do we have to consider that sort of stuff? And that was acknowledged. It wasn't one for the planning committee, but it might be one for further conversation. But all that said, it does, as we've been advised by the officers, comply with the planning scheme, and there was unanimous agreement with that.
Any further discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 9.4. Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Item 9.4 is an application to extend an existing permit on 209, 213 Harrington Street.
Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is it's an interesting one because we've got effectively two applications on the same night for the same site. One was the previous one for the KFC, and the other one is before us now, which is an extension on a previously approved permit for 39 multiple dwellings, as well as retail and food services. So we did, and it was discussed in committee, we do have the strange opportunity of deciding what goes in there. I think all of us agree that we'd prefer to see residential on there, with the previous permit notwithstanding. There was some discussion, there was a representation made that neighbours would have preferred this to have been resubmitted under the new apartment code, but it was indicated that if that was the case, the developer may not have gone ahead with this at all, so we may have ended up with nothing. But all of that said, what we do have before us was previously permitted, and I think this would be a good outcome if this was to be approved.
Further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Again say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 9.5.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Item 9.5, 156 Newtown Road. I'll move that, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This was one that we just discussed in the special committee just earlier. It's for 19 multiple dwellings and a fitness centre. This has come to us in a couple of iterations already, or in one iteration already, and it was withdrawn, and some changes were made as given feedback from the council. And what we do have before us is one that is now recommended for approval by officers. There was still some, representations made by next door about the size of the building and the setbacks. I think there was discussion in committee last week that the discretions around the setback actually went the other way to what the representative was suggesting, that it only allowed for the setback to be closer to the street, not further away, which is what the neighbour would have preferred. There are still some sort of niggling concerns about this, but the advice that we got from the officers was quite strong on this, that this was ultimately compliant with the scheme. And should it be built, I think it would be a good result from a housing supply perspective. So I'll commend this one, Lord Mayor.
Further discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. We had quite a lengthy discussion on this matter at the City Planning, and again this afternoon when we looked at it, and I would like to simply recapitulate the 3 points that I made and the answers that were given. And I refer to, firstly, point number 1, clause 1548P1, and I read, it says this, that a dwelling must, and the operative word I think is must, be sited and designed to optimize sunlight to at least one habitable room other than the bedroom. Now, as per the report of the staff, page 37, attachment A.6.8.6, and I read, it states that it is noted that apartment 14 would only have one bedroom and would not receive direct sunlight. Now, when you put that under clause 1548, it does not in any way say that, in this whole unit that you are building, the complex, if one particular unit does not have sunlight, it'll be okay. It's a use of discretion, as it were. But the evidence before me is very clear that they will not receive direct sunlight, and therefore it does not satisfy clause 1548P1. The second point I raised was in regards to the Urban Design Advisory Panel, who are also qualified people. Sometimes we agree with them and sometimes we don't. And in this particular instance, I read as to what they state, and this is what they state: that we are concerned regarding the impact of the proposed development on the residents. It will present an overbearing presence and overshadow properties. Now, it is not simply overshadow a property, but properties. So again, if you put that under the clause that we have, it does not satisfy, in my view. And the third point I raise, and others have alternative views, and that is to do with parking spaces. In the residential component, there is a shortfall of 5 car parking spaces, and in the gym component, they are required to have 17, and there is none. So there is a total shortfall of 22. So under clause E661P1, in my view, it does not satisfy it. Now, we have constantly spoken about parking matters, especially in the Newtown area, in that particular area. And for me, I think the evidence presented to us is slightly dated. If it was done in September 2020, when we had closed borders, it is a different time. If we were to do it today, there'll be a different set of empirical evidence presented to us. So on those grounds, I use my own discretion and judgment to not support this. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I think this is, whilst we know that we need residential apartments, there are some red flags for me, and Councillor Dutta has raised some of these concerns, but I'd like to just raise some of the things that really make me wonder as to the benefits or otherwise to residents with this development. Firstly, we've heard about the Urban Design Advisory Panel, and their concerns were in the report. The Urban Design Advisory Panel saw an earlier version of this development, and that wasn't within the building envelope. It was having a significant impact on the developments, the residences to the south, and we have representatives from the south of this development who have concerns. Even though it is now within the building envelope, those buildings to the south, those houses, will have a deleterious impact in relation to because of this development. So there is something which you know, like if you're building something, you don't really want to have a bad impact on neighbours, in my thinking, and that was how I thought about the development at 345 Sandy Bay Road, which is the corner of Earl Street and Sandy Bay Road. Great development, new apartments, but a deleterious impact on the neighbour at 2 Earl Street and other neighbours on the southern side of the building. So that's one aspect of this that I am not particularly fond of. Councillor Dutta has also raised the issue around the apartment where there won't be much sunlight into living rooms, and I asked the question during committee at this special meeting that we've just had around the apartment standards, how this match up to the central Hobart apartment standards. The answer was that we're not measuring against those apartment standards, but that is my concern. You know, the private open space is diminished somewhat. Oh, well, you know, it's okay. It's met by the performance criteria, but that was my concern as well. And the last concern that I have is in relation to, if this is a mixed use, retail and commercial, there will be a commercial gym inside this building on the ground floor. Now, you know, that's all very well from a planning perspective, but I've had recently, I mean, we've had it at Salamanca Square, residents who've been impacted by gyms close by. I've had and I'm sure other people around the table have had concerns raised with them in relation to gyms being close to residential areas. From the understanding, from my understanding, from what Ms. Avey said, if there's not really noise mitigation as part of this application. If complaints are raised, it will go to MCA. It will be considered under state legislation for noise management, and so the noise mitigation will be a problem for residents. Now, I think the heritage issues have been addressed, and I know that doesn't suit all representatives, but we have had our heritage officers say that this is suitable. So I'm very much in two minds in relation to this application. I think there are so many things that are questionable about the standards and quality that
30 seconds.
That it does concern me in relation to this. So I question whether this development is going to be all that it is cracked up to be.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, some of those issues that have been brought up by Councillor Dutta and now the Deputy were discussed in great length at the planning meeting. Now I know the Deputy wasn't present because she was leave of absence. I did bring up first that apartment 14, and obviously Councillor Dutta has picked that up quite well. I did bring up the effect of the residents in the south side of this development, but it was pointed out that under the planning rules that the development could happen and nothing could be changed there. So I think the Deputy, if she's complaining about something, she should be complaining about the planning scheme, not so much this development, because it follows the rules. I am concerned, but it's not to the extent that I'm going to vote against it. I'm concerned about the heritage streetscape that's going to be altered quite dramatically. I have no concerns about the gym. There's in fact a very, very good development down in Salamanca, one of the first unit development in Salamanca there, that our former Lord Mayor Dern Kennedy had one of the lovely apartments there. On the ground floor there of her apartment block was a gym, or is a gym. And so I think it's, if you're going to have apartment living, then you have to have apartment facilities, and gyms are quite, there's probably Alderman Zuko, who's got a lot more knowledge about Melbourne. Many apartment blocks in Melbourne have gyms and pools as well.
Sure do.
Yeah, we've got a few apartment blocks. The one down at end of Collins Street there's a pool there that's available to the, and a gym available to the residents. So I don't have any concerns about the gym. If there is a noise problem, then the environmental regulation will come in there. 19 residents are needed in Hobart. If we vote against this, which follows the rules according to our officers, I think it is it demonstrates to us that we are not interested in solving the housing problem. I think we've all got to vote for it. It follows the rules. There are concerns which are presumably will be appealed against. The concerns about the heritage from the neighbour of the rectory. But I think if a building follows the rules, we should be attacking the rules, not a development that follows the rules. So all I can say is I hope the council demonstrates by voting unanimously for 19 more residents.
Further discussion? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, look, I wasn't going to speak, but I've been motivated by my colleague across the table here. Everyone has the right to vote as their conscience tells them.
Hear, hear.
So I wouldn't let any, I wouldn't feel cajoled.
I never do.
Out of vote.
I thought it was debate.
But look, I did move this item at committee because I realised that we couldn't defend it. It had passed the planning scheme. It was the second iteration. It had moved forward to bring the development inside the building envelope, so that reason for refusal was cancelled because it did comply. I don't think it's a great outcome for the streetscape, and I would like to see the celebration of the heritage buildings next door a bit more as you come down the street, and that's potentially, well, that has been altered. And won't be seeing that same vista again. But I couldn't, in all good consciousness, vote against this proposal because I didn't feel there was reasons to vote against it. We couldn't defend it if we did. So I'll be supporting it again like I did at the committee meeting. I have sympathy for the neighbours. It's not necessarily the best outcome for them. However, there are no grounds that I can think of that are substantial enough to vote no.
Alderman Zuko.
I wasn't going to speak either, but my name was mentioned, and when my name's mentioned, I've got to make a point.
Your name?
Alderman Briscoe. So blame Alderman Briscoe for the last two speakers, making this meeting go a little bit further. Lord Mayor, it was mentioned about gyms and all that. And yes, I do have an apartment block in Melbourne, and our gym's open till 10 o'clock each night, 7 days a week. So it gives residents quite use. Our swimming pool's also open till 10 o'clock every night, and our barbecue facilities are open till 9 o'clock every night. But in respect of any concerns, I think we can be alleviated because there'll be people out there thinking, oh, you know, the hours of this gym. So let's make it clear. The gym will be open 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Mondays to Friday. I don't think that's inappropriate. I don't think that'll wake up the neighbourhood. I don't think that'll cause any undue concerns to the neighbourhood for being open between those times. Furthermore, but on Saturdays, it's open between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Again, it doesn't and it would not impede on general amenities for the residents, and also Sundays and public holidays, it's between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. So even though there might be a number of people concerned with some components of this development, I don't think the gym component is going to create any undue concerns for any of the residents or any of the people that would live there or any of the people that would live in the surrounding area, because those times there are reasonable times.
Okay, would you like to sum up, Alderman Baracus?
Just quickly, Lord Mayor. Just to touch on a few things. Whilst I agree with everything Alderman Briscoe said, let's steer it back to the planning issue itself. I think when we do have competing discretionary issues here, that's where it's upon us to, as elected members, to exercise our priorities, and I think that's what Alderman Briscoe may have been trying to allude to insofar as addressing the housing problem. I appreciate that the apartment code might be a more ideal set of rules for us to hope for when it comes to apartment-style developments occurring in the city. But it is also true that we do have to, and we're bound to, assess an application according to the rules that it's being assessed by, and this application is being assessed by the previous set of rules. So, whilst we might like or hope that it was in a certain configuration, that's not the case, and we have to assess it according to the rules of the day, and that's what we have in front of us. I know Councillor Dutta did make the comment about that one dwelling that didn't have direct sunlight, and we did go back and forward on this in committee a number of times, and in some depth, and the advice from the officers was that they did look at the application on the whole, and that was the only dwelling that had less than ideal sunlight, and that the I can't remember what the word was. Ms. Avey might be able to help me. Optimised, I think it was. And if was that the terminology that was used?
Through you, Chair, yes, I understand that's the phrase used in the expression.
Thank you. Don't know what that was.
Turn it off.
But
Point of order.
just powering through that, Lord Mayor. The phrase of the word optimise, I think, in all of this, and this was once again discussed in committee, was the best possible outcome here. And I think when you have a large development here with a large number of dwellings, which we do all want, when you have a mass that results with only one apartment there that doesn't have direct sunlight, I think many would say that, all things considered, if that was the best that they could achieve, that would be the optimal outcome there. And I think that's what led to the officers recommending approval on that criteria. So with all of that said, I'll commend this, and I hope that we all do approve this. It'll be a good outcome for the city and for the area, I think, Lord Mayor.
I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, can't quite see Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Fox, Alderman Baracus, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Councillor Dutta and the Deputy Lord Mayor. It's carried, Lord Mayor, 10 votes to 2.
Item 10, Enterprise Road, Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Quick draw there. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Item 10, amendment for rezoning for Enterprise Road. This is one that has bounced around council for some time now. I think almost the entire term of this council has sort of come back and forward with applications and then petitions for rezoning. And going back on the history of this one, Lord Mayor, anybody looking at this site might think that it's inappropriately zoned, and the reason for that isn't that anybody falsely decided to zone it as it is. It was when we were going through the interim planning scheme, there was a number of recategorisations from old terminology and categorisations under Hobart's planning scheme to the new system, and in that recategorisation, it ended up consequently being zoned as in a residential, so I think everybody around everybody in the discussions, I think everybody in committee have all agreed, and I think over this whole saga, that this was inappropriately zoned. So this is us finally getting to the point where we're pulling the trigger on this and sending it off to be for exhibition. So hopefully this does result, and I believe it would result in this area being more appropriately zoned. Not to say that it can't be developed with housing on there, but it would be, given that it abuts straight onto a reserve, it would be more appropriate style of housing, and I think that's something that generally we're all in agreement on. So I'll commend this one, Lord Mayor.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Just have a question through you to Ms Avey. Are there active development applications in relation to this area?
Through your chair, no, not at the moment.
Look, I think this is a really good outcome for a very driven community who were concerned about the impacts of quite substantially different development patterns in this area. I think it's a really good position that the council has consistently taken on this planning scheme amendment. So I also commend this. I think it's been a really good exercise to see how well things can be done when you have a motivated and very knowledgeable community as to what they can achieve. So really pleased to see this, Lord Mayor.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 11.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is amendment to planning legislation, major projects, and the motion is that the council endorse response to the proposed amendments for the major projects.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think the quickest way to there's a number of amendments, and I won't read them all. It's various, and it's to strengthen the major projects legislation. And generally, the officer's advice here was, and I'll just read it straight out: the proposed amendments are largely supported. However, there are some concerns regarding the role of council in the assessment of major projects, particularly in its capacity as stormwater manager and highway authority, and the expectation that the council will carry out steps with no ability to charge fees. So the response is in those terms. That so I'll commend that, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. And obviously, this report was written by the officers, and we're just endorsing what they've already submitted. And I thank the officers for what they have brought up, particularly around the opening of roads, or for gas pipelines, I think, and for stormwater. I think that was one of the other provisions that was probably overlooked with the major projects. I endorse what the officers have said, but again raise the issue about major projects and this major projects legislation, and how I feel that this undoubtedly erodes public comment in relation to this what the government is proposing. So whilst we're just talking about specifics to the major projects legislation, to the amendment, it still does really need to be said that the major projects legislation really does change the playing field in relation to public comment.
Alderman Briscoe.
Just very quick question, Lord Mayor, to our Director Planning. Through you, Chair, to the Director. Has there been any project considered under the project planning legislation, the major planning legislation, major project planning legislation?
Noe or Ms Abbey?
Yes, there has been, Chair, but not in the boundaries of the City of Hobart.
Just for a matter of information, can you just elaborate which one would have been considered?
Look, my understanding is that the Bridgewater Bridge is one of those applications that have gone through that process.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Would you like to sum up, Alderman Baracus?
No, Lord Mayor, other than to say I think there's a variety of views as to the value of the major project legislation, but I think the getting outside of those sort of political comments, I think the suggestions and concerns put by the officers are reasonable, so I'll just commend that, Lord Mayor.
Order, Lord Mayor.
Yes.
I'm just curious as to what Alderman Baracus means by political comments.
Sorry, that's not really a point of order in terms of section 23.
Well, I need a point of clarification. Could Alderman Baracus describe what he actually means by political?
Would you like? You don't have to take that.
I'm happy to, Lord Mayor. I think, and it wasn't sort of necessarily intended as a slight, Lord Mayor, but I think when we're talking about whether or not we're in favour of or against certain legislation, or whether or not we think certain policies are good or bad, I think that's political, not to say partisan. I think it's just that is the nature of political debate, Lord Mayor, and that's comments of a political nature. It is what it is. I wasn't being detrimental in that sense, but there's issues of the details of what we're discussing, then there's political comment, and I think that's what that was.
Okay, good. Let's move on now and vote on this matter. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 12 is a motion from Alderman Zuko. Would you like to move your motion, Alderman Zuko?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I just move the motion for debate.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Now, I just want to make this point very, very clear. This is not directed at anyone or any particular person. This is about a situation that occurred. I received 2 complaints, and then I received actually something that came that had some sense. And I was asked a question by a particular person. What are the protocols in respect of inappropriate language on the floor of council? I actually knew the answer to that. You could call up a point of order, which has been raised by the CEO in the administration response to that. On the particular evening, Lord Mayor, I moved a number of items early in the night, and there was a little bit of relative discussion between yourself and myself about the correct procedures. There was the second item I really wanted to move to be deferred. I even made a statement and said I want to defer this. I really don't want to defer it, but I haven't got the will to defer it because I was actually felt quite deflated because all I'm trying to do, Lord Mayor, is come in this chamber and debate in what I believe is an appropriate manner. I actually commend my fellow elected member and Councillor Dutta, who understood what I was saying and actually moved that deferral, which made my life easier. I then decided, look, I'm not going to get up anymore and make points of orders and all this and that, because I really do feel deflated when you get into this chamber. And I've got to say, Lord Mayor, I do understand the meeting procedures and I do understand them quite well. But the question that I was asked about the protocols, I said, well, I could have called a point of order, but I didn't feel like doing so at the time because of the situation. After watching the inappropriate language, I actually texted a fellow alderman. I actually looked at everyone's faces, and I actually even heard you, Lord Mayor, stuttering. Now, to my point of view, that to me meant to me is how either the chair at the time didn't understand what to do or how to do it or whatever have you. And I thought, if we're going to have that situation where we got the chairperson stuttering when a certain situation happens, I think we need to get some advice and at least have a protocol on it if it happens, so that way there, whether it's a chairman or whether it's even the CEO, could probably immediately step in and do something about it. Again, this is not in any shape or form about any particular person, because if I wanted it that way, Lord Mayor, I could have actually put it into my notice of motion. I didn't want to do that, and I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that we as a council have a very clear pathway and protocol that if in the future certain things happen, this is what will happen. And that's what I'd like to see. So then it's not Alderman Zuko getting up there, or Alderman Briscoe, or Councillor Sherlock getting up on a point of order if I'm inappropriate or if Alderman Thomas is inappropriate, or anybody. Now, to my point of view, if we've got it very clear about how we move forward, it makes it clear. Then I don't have to try and answer the two members of the public and the one that asked me the question. I said that prompted me to bring this forward. Again, this is not about personalities, this is not about persons or anything other than I want to see something come back to us, so we've got a clear defined protocol. And I move it, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I appreciate Alderman Zuko bringing this for us. What you're saying is that we need some guidelines for the chair not to be hesitant or stutter, that certain standard behaviour is expected in this chamber. It was pointed out to me, you know, how Twitter is so nasty sometimes. Oh, it's just you boomer generation. We accept swear words much more regularly than you do. And I've noticed in this term of council that various new elected people have used language that wasn't prevalent in the previous councils I've served under. And even public meetings, bad language happening in public meetings that the council have called. To me, I think the standard has to be higher than the nightclub scene or the bar scene or the around your barbecue with your mates. I think it has to be a certain respect to people. The question I have, and maybe the mover of the motion might include in. I did notice after I got complaints too, how come that behaviour was accepted, because behaviour ignored is behaviour accepted. A day later, I think it was a day later, it might have been 2 days later, suddenly the YouTube video of that meeting, there was a beep that actually deleted the sound of those inappropriate swear words. And I was wondering whether, have we got a protocol around who censors our YouTube videos? And I would say that, hey, this week it might be bad language. Next week it could be a notice of a motion about lack of competence in the chair, or or say someone like me moving a motion which someone like the deputy was upset at. Now I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what protocols do we use when, or who gives permission for words that come out of elected members' mouth is censored? And where is it, and maybe when we work out the protocols for the chair to have a guidance, we need protocols around censoring YouTube. And now I have seen quite an uncensored version still floating around, so it got out there in the community that people, if they want to listen to it, it's available. I think it got quite a run in social media as well. So, but I'm worried about, well, if the CEO, and I think the CEO's online there, I suppose from complaints, that's where it came from, the CEO used her judgment to delete it, and I think that's fair enough, but I would like to think there's a protocol around that as well. And if perhaps if I could ask the question to the CEO who's online here. The question is...
Question to the CEO?
Yeah. It's very hard to answer a question, I'm sure, that's on a Zoom meeting, but all I can say is, can you see the value if we have a protocol around if we have to do such things in the future? Would it make your job easier?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Without entering into the debate, I can just say that to my knowledge there isn't a protocol that exists right now. But Alderman Briscoe, you've raised the matter of censorship and how those decisions are made. Lord Mayor, I would defer to our Manager of Legal and Governance to provide perhaps some clarity around the censoring of the YouTube footage, and there may in fact be a protocol in place that I'm not aware of, Lord Mayor, but I do take the point. Thank you.
Thank you. And we don't really want to put Mr Jackson on the spot here, so he'll provide something on notice,
Something
I imagine.
in writing
Yeah.
on notice.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So that's a question on notice.
I just have a question, if I may, Lord Mayor. Look, Alderman Briscoe asked whether or not I'd accept. I just want to get clarification whether he wants me to accept it in or not, on what are the wording if he does. I just need to know.
Thank you. If I could answer that, yes, I would like, and a protocol be developed for when we edit, let's say edit.
Censorship.
Well, perhaps censorship shows a pejorative word. Let's say edit any YouTube videos of council meetings.
I'm happy to accept it in if the seconders.
Actually, no, I wouldn't. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I won't accept it. Reason being that we don't have the advice from Mr Jackson yet. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I've been here for a few years, and I've been in this chamber with Lord Mayor Valentine, Lord Mayor Thomas, Lord Mayor Hickey, and Christie for a little while there, and yourself. And in all that time, I have been far more offended by some of the carry-on in the chamber with regard to the Lord Mayors and not listening to directions from the Lord Mayor. Far more stressed by some of the chaos that's been created in the chamber by challenges to all of those Lord Mayors over time. I remember Alderman Thomas being challenged on a number of occasions, and even one time with Alderman Valentine, I remember him using the gavel a couple of times as well. So he's the only one of the 5 that I've ever seen use the gavel. But sometimes it's really hard to control the chamber because of the antics of various elected representatives. And I've found that far more offensive than the use of one word, which was used in a particular context and probably was used for emphasis about a particular issue. Whereas a lot of the other time where I've been offended in the chamber has been just pointless. It's been grandstanding, it's been done for political gain. So this motion, while I understand the intent of it, I do feel that it's up to the chair to make a call on whether or not they've found something offensive. But even when the chair does find something offensive, sometimes it's really hard to gain the control of the meeting, because often there's a deliberate push not to allow that to occur. So I didn't find it offensive what occurred on the night. I didn't receive any correspondence about one word that was used in what I think was probably almost an appropriate context, even though I would caution all councillors to just be careful about what language they use. But I have heard far worse language, not with swear words, but with refusal to comply with directions from 5 Lord Mayors across time. 5 Lord Mayors have always had a hard time in the chair making elected representatives come to order at times. So I find that to be much more, for me personally, an issue than the use of one word, which is now escalated into, I don't know what it is, but it's one word that was used, and now it's like it's almost, I can't think of the language to use to describe how one word has caused this cascading effect, whereas poor behaviour across the 5 Lord Mayors who have been in that chair that have needed, and they've needed to control, that I found that much more of an issue.
I think it was Councillor Fox, sorry.
Thank you. I would just like to take this opportunity to apologise for swearing in the chamber. It was not intentional, as is implied in the rationale for this motion, which I think is a little bit silly. There are lots of other words that I could have used, that I should have used in relation to it. but I wasn't thinking it was done, so I'm sorry. I actually didn't receive any complaints or comments on it, but I am happy to apologise to anybody who took offence to my use of the F word. Yeah, that said, I do think this motion is a little bit redundant. I understand that it's not intended to be targeted, but I do think that, you know, we all know our code of conduct, and we all know that we have the right to call out, you know, comments and things that we find offensive at the time. And I guess for me personally, the fact that nobody did at the time means it can't have been that truly offensive. I just think it's a little bit of a waste of time, and that's just my opinion.
Councillor, I think Thomas might have, so Alderman Thomas might have been first.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Look, and I didn't say anything on the night because I woke up next morning and said, did I hear that last night? In actual fact, I think it was a delayed reaction, and I do take on board what Councillor Harvey is saying about different behaviour, and words will have an effect, and sometimes behavioural. Totally away a swear word or a word of non-general usage in this chamber might cause some people around the table. Look, in considering this, it's an interesting thing, and it's certainly something that I think I would have found valid when I was the Lord Mayor, sitting where you are, Lord Mayor. But what happens in a general situation in which, through any general night, and not necessarily on a ruling in respect to a point of order, what happens if somebody in the chair, and we're talking about at least 5 chairs here, we're talking about chairs of committees and the chair of council, in actual fact invokes someone to actually say point of order, chair. So does that, and I'm just asking as a general thing, does that mean that if it happened in this chamber, you would, as the person to whom the behaviour is being asserted, vacate the chair and have the deputy go in and do the ruling? Because it's something that I just don't think has ever been addressed. And it's something that, as I said, it relates to all chairs and presumably relates to all chairs of all councils in Tasmania. But I think it's something we could, if this motion is passed, if we could add that as an amendment to deal with how are points of order in relation to the chair of the meeting, of that particular meeting, handled. Because it can't be handled, you can't deal with it yourself or that chairman, because obviously you're not going to be objective, even if you might try to be. So if someone could second that as an amendment, I think that's something that we should be dealing with as well.
Sorry, so that would have to be...
an amendment.
Yes, an amendment.
So we have to vote on that separately rather than have it... So that's an amendment moved by Alderman Thomas, seconded by Alderman Barakis, and because that's a separate addition to the motion, I'm just going to deal with that one for now, so we don't get muddled up with the substantive motion. So would anyone like to speak to that amendment of adding in the clarification on taking a point of order against the chair?
So I just have a question, Lord Mayor, just with regards to that amendment. Is that actually addressed in the Act at all as a...
Through you, Lord Mayor, no, it's not.
So could we have it as separated, as 2 separate ones? So an amendment? Okay, yep, thank you.
Just a query, I would rather it separated as well, because I would like to maybe vote for one and not vote for another, or vice versa, rather than knock off the potential.
Lord Mayor, it's an amendment to this motion, and it can be taken separately when they're both put.
All right, so we can do them as separate items if you want. So this is seeking advice on the issue of points of order against the chair from the Director of Local Government. Is that right?
Just to speak on this, how does this apply to committee meetings? If there's a point of order against the committee chair, then is it the most senior person?
Yes, sir. I suppose that'd be too advised.
Yeah, so
that's what I'm
I think this could be a bit awkward in a committee meeting where the most senior person who has moved, so the person who's moved the point of order is disqualified, and if they're the most senior, then it goes to the next person, or then do we draw lots after that? I'm not quite sure.
Overthinking it.
Yeah.
I think,
Lord Mayor.
sorry, I think it was actually.
Oh, sorry, I
Councillor Dutton's
apologise.
next. So this is, we're just speaking on the amendment
Yes,
about
right.
seeking advice, and it may not actually be the Director of Local Government, it may be he often says you have to get your advice somewhere else. But Councillor Dutton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question for clarification. There are members here who have been on the council for quite some time, and I want to just seek clarification if they have found problems with that particular issue as far as standing order is concerned in the many years they have been here.
Look, I can answer that question. I'll speak to the amendment and answering the question. It's happened in this term of there was a in fact it might have been me or some other person that drew a point of order at the current Lord Mayor, and she ruled it on herself. Now, we thought that was strange at the time, but in the absence of a rule, the chair was entitled to rule on it. So I think it's respect to the chair that we have a rule that that the chair can follow. And oh yes, as a point of order against me, I will get the deputy up there and while it's being dealt with, and it just makes it a little bit clearer for whoever the chair is. As to, I think, in terms of the amendment, because I'm talking to the amendment now, I think it's well done for a former Lord Mayor to bring that up. I can't remember more often that I've been through most of the councils that Councillor Harvey's been through, and a little bit more. Robust debate sometimes, if you're on the wrong side of history, can be considered to be what Councillor Harvey has characterised it as. But I'm sure whoever the chair is, if we're all a fairly independent lot, there are going to be times then where we have robust debate. I can't see any problem with that. As long as when we come to situation of points of order, that there are systems in place that we're going to be all treated fairly, rather than what colour we are, or whether we're independent or Labor or Liberal or Green or whoever, because it probably in the next few years our councils will probably turn more politically party orientated, that whoever the person calling the point of order knows that they're going to be dealt in a process that's fair. So I support the amendment of our former Lord Mayor, a former Lord Mayor. I think it was 2 Lord Mayors ago, but I think his wisdom there should be respected.
Okay, further discussion, Councillor Dutton.
Thank you.
Amendment, Councillor Dutton.
Yeah, I'm speaking to the amendment. Thank you for that clarification. I read from the meeting procedures, Rule 23 and number 4, clause 4 says, the chairperson's ruling on a point of order A is not to be questioned and is binding on the meeting. Now, this supersedes, in my view, any policy that we will rule or make. But if this is what we are required to do, then I think I accept that as such. And in my time here, I haven't seen any problem with that regard. People take it personally because it's been ruled against you, and therefore you feel that, and it's a matter of feeling. But here it says very clearly that the chair of the meeting, the chairperson's ruling on the point of order is not to be questioned. So that's my understanding of it, that's all.
Lord Mayor, I'd like to...
Alderman
Two things. There was a question asked about whether or not it's the chairperson or the Lord Mayor at the time has ruled on points of order. As the longest serving elected member, I've seen just about every Lord Mayor do so. And if we can honestly believe that a person can make a determination on their own behalf on something they're being questioned about, I've got to say that goes right away from any fairness and equity. I understand what Councillor Dutton is talking about, the chairperson's ruling on a point of order cannot be questioned. This is not about the chairperson or the Lord Mayor making a ruling on a point of order. I believe what Alderman Thomas is trying to say here, it's whether or not the chairperson of a meeting whether it be the Lord Mayor, myself as a chairperson, should be ruling on a point of order directed towards me. And I think if I am making that determination, could I be considered whether I take a biased approach to it? And that's the question here. Now, whether or not it's the janitor that makes that determination or not, I believe appropriate advice would provide us with possibly a mechanism in resolving that, so there's no question that if I'm chairing a meeting and someone calls a point of order on me, see, everyone's thinking about the Lord Mayor. I'm sorry, this is not, I don't take this as just the Lord Mayor, I take this as the chairperson. Is that correct? If I need this clarified. Yes. Let's go. Any chairperson. So I believe that if someone's called a point of order against me, my final determination should not be that, and I shouldn't be making that determination. Fully support the amendment, Lord Mayor, because it's not about personalities, it's not about personal, it's not about the Lord Mayor, it's about a person that's chairing the meeting. The person that's chairing the meeting could also be the next person in line if I'm away. So in my committee, the next person in line is Alderman Baracus, I think. No? No, sorry. Sorry, Alderman Coates. It's Councillor Coates, right? No, sorry, Councillor Sexton. I sincerely apologise. So what I'm getting at is, if Councillor Sexton is chairing the Finance Committee in my absence, there's the chairperson. So what I'd like to know is what would be the best mechanism for the chairperson of the time to make a determination of a point of order against the chairperson who at the time. Now, how it is, I don't know. I haven't even given any thought to that. There's things going around my head, just like Alderman Harvey, but I haven't got the answer, and I believe the best way going forward is to get some advice on it.
Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just check. So if I speak to the amendment, I can still speak to the substantive later. Yeah. Look, I think I'll start by, agreeing with what was said. Both this and the main motion needs to be really made clear that this isn't intended on being an attack on anybody, because I think that detracts from the intent of what's being discussed here. And as Alderman Zuko said, it's about the chair, not the Lord Mayor, or not the chair of this committee or that committee. It's just the chair of any meeting. In regards to what Councillor Dutta said, as far as the provision about the chair's ruling being final, I think if there was a policy that we were to enter into, obviously after receiving advice, and the mayor, or the chair, sorry, upon getting a point of order, deferred to whoever was next according to the policy, they wouldn't have made a ruling contrary to that policy. So I don't think they contradict each other or conflict with each other in that way. I understand, and I'm happy to be corrected. I think Clarence actually has provisions around this. I was told this a little while ago, that if points of order were made, to the mayor, the deputy mayor was the one that heard that. I think I could be corrected. I'm not. So it's possible that we look at emulating what other councils have done. It's not obviously not intended on being a slight on anybody, but I think if anybody was receiving a complaint against themselves, it'd be hard for anybody to assess that complaint objectively, because somebody might make a comment having either offended somebody or having breached some sort of provision of the Local Government Act as far as meeting procedures, and having done so with the best intentions and not intending on offending, may have done so nonetheless. So it's a bit hard for somebody to make a fair assessment with their own colouring of what they said. Like I've made comments before that have been pulled up on points of order. And when I made those comments, I had no intention of offending anybody or upsetting anybody. So it's a bit. I think it places an unfair burden on the chair to be able to be put in that position where they're having to decide whether or not something that they did was in order or not in order, and then be held to whether or not they were behaving fairly or not. So I think that, honestly, I think there's a number of things that we could probably seek better clarification on to make sure our meeting procedures go smoother. I suppose a good example of that was me asking about the speaking on amendments and substantive motion, because I think there's been that and other confusions in the past, and I think as Councillor Harvey said, there's been some times where there's been challenges over meeting procedures, and sometimes that's based on interpretations of the rules and meeting procedures. So it could benefit us, and maybe in the future to look into these in more depth to have better clarity on the rules and how these meetings are to be conducted as far as meeting procedures. But I think that might be a conversation for another day. Look, I'd be supporting this. I think it's good to set in these rules so as to ensure that the rulings of the chair, whilst they are final, I think they need to be as above reproach as possible. And I think having a decision made at arm's length to the person themselves is the best way to do that. And I think that's entirely reasonable, and I don't think it should be taken as being a slight or a attack or a criticism of any one individual.
Lord Mayor?
Sorry.
Can I ask a question,
Yeah.
please? I just want to clarify. I think I'm leaning towards supporting both motions. I just want to clarify. Elected members using direct or explicit or inappropriate language. For me, the inappropriate language is also challenging language. It doesn't have to be swearing. It's the way the language is used, the forcefulness of the language directed towards the chair or any other person in the room. So if that was covered in this as well, and how do we just keep the tone to a certain level? Because I don't find necessarily the particular words. This is a question. Yeah.
As a mover of the motion, I can...
Well, yeah, through you, Chair, to the mover of the motion.
Look, the reality is, and this is the reality, is we are now... That's what I'm doing. The reality is we are now predominantly going out to the public on a regular basis, right? Now, I consider... I'm one person, I do swear from many times, but I have never sworn in this chamber. That's the reality. I believe it's inappropriate language.
And
that,
behaviour?
No. Look, I'll speak to that later on in my summing up. Lord Mayor.
It is a point of order. I'm sorry. Yes.
The discussion here is with regards to the amendment and not to the substantive motion, I understand.
I was asked a question on the.
So if we can go back to the amendment, please.
Okay, that's what I'm endeavouring to answer the question.
No, I think Councillor Harvey, the question is related to the other part of the motion.
I'll ask it
not the
again in a
amendment.
minute. Yeah.
Okay, anything more on this amendment, please?
Not a problem.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, I think that we have two separate issues here. One is the amendment, which is talking about the points of order against the chair, and then we're talking about the substantive motion, which is about protocols using direct and explicit or inappropriate language. So I'm going to speak to the amendment. And to me, I think it's a fair and reasonable request to have the protocols in place with regards to points of order made against the chair. I think, again, as Alderman Baraka said, those kinds of decisions need to be made at arm's length for the chair when a point of order is made against the chair. And as a chair of my own committee, and touch wood, I haven't had a point of order yet, which is really great. I think that's a really reasonable request. I will speak to the substantive motion later because I have some issues with that, but with regards to protocols, with regards to Alderman Thomas's amendment, I'm fully in support of that.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Can we have the amendment read, please?
My understanding is that it's seeking advice on the rules around points of order against the chair.
Is that how it reads? Sorry, Lord Mayor, but...
Through you, Lord Mayor, if you're happy. More or less, the way I had it, Lord Mayor, was that there was a part two. Effectively, Alderman Thomas's amendment became a part two to the motion, that the report also provide clarification in relation to the appropriate method for dealing with points of order raised against the chairperson of a meeting.
Any chairperson of any meeting.
Lord Mayor, I'll rise to speak to the amendment. My answer is kind of tied up with the overall motion. Look, I believe that this is something. There are meeting procedures, and as imperfect as they might be, those things should be considered, by the Director of Local Government. So, whilst I understand the intent, I just feel that we create two separate rule books, if you like, imperfect or perfect as they might be. So I'm not going to support the amendment. I just feel that it's probably something that should be looked at in a greater, in a much broader context.
Further discussion?
Just a question. What do we? I'm not sure that I understand the deputy's point in the sense that it was my understanding that that's who we would be directing the question to, or that was certainly one of the options.
Wasn't in the.
In terms of developing our in our approach to
My understanding.
points of order.
Yeah.
I mean, who else would we seek advice from, if not from the Director of Local Government?
I might take that question if I may, Alderman Sexton. The motion asks us to prepare a report, and that's what we would do. Now, we would seek advice from a number of stakeholders in the preparation of that report, certainly the Director of Local Government, quite possibly LGAT, maybe other councils, and we might secure some external legal advice. So it'll depend on who we think we need to go to in terms of the preparation of this report. But what we'd be coming back to you is with the most comprehensive advice possible.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment? I might just make a few comments. Look, I think this is getting into a little bit of navel gazing as far as I'm concerned. We've spent a lot of time on this. We actually don't. We're sort of creating. We're creating an issue around a problem that hasn't quite been defined, in that there's some random times when perhaps a point of order is directed against the chair, and we're not sure whether the chair can make that judgment. I think that's the point of a good chair, and if there's concerns about those points of order, things can be raised with the general manager or others. I mean, the idea that we would have, previously, when we've talked about points of order in this chamber, I've actually sought information from other councils about how they deal with points of order, and their reaction to me was, oh, we hardly ever have points of order. I mean, this kind of, navel gazing around, oh, what happens if the chair has a point of order against them? It's really only would be when I'm talking about something myself. That's the main time it comes up, when I'm having my chance to have my say, which I only get to do right at the end. And sometimes, on a couple of occasions, a couple of people haven't liked what I've said, but I don't think it's a sort of a massive problem. But now we're thinking about trying to create additional protocols on top of the rules of the Local Government Act, which clearly state that it's the chair's ruling on a point of order, so that we potentially, I leave the chair and somebody else makes a determination on that. I mean, and here we are, our staff have got so much on, and we're asking for urgent reports on these kind of minutiae of meeting procedure. I mean, it just, it does beg a belief, and it does worry me that this all began, really, which I'll get to when we get to the substantive. But, I really, I just don't feel that this is a particularly massive issue that we need to get urgent reports and get the staff to do legal advice, right to the Director of Local Government. I mean, where's the problem, really? The meeting procedures set out the rules. Very few other councils even deal with points of order, hardly ever. Let's just be a little bit collaborative and practical around these things. Okay. So I'll put the amendment that was moved by Alderman Thomas and seconded by Alderman Baracus. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. No. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates, Alderman Baracus, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
And against? Oh, sorry.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor, the Lord Mayor. It's tied, Lord Mayor, 6 votes to all, so the motion's lost.
That's
the amendment's
the amendment.
lost.
Okay, so now we'll move
All
on.
party lines.
We'll move back to the, excuse me, Alderman Briscoe, there was no need to interrupt in that way.
I did not interrupt.
Well, to make a sign across the floor.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
I'm not going to hold back anymore. A little while ago, when I was speaking, Alderman Harvey interrupted and you said nothing. So if you're going to, I haven't finished my point of order.
Yes, what is the point of order?
If you're going to call to task an elected member, you should talk.
That's not a point of order.
Lord
Point
Mayor,
of clarification.
I was talking
No,
to
it's not.
Alderman.
Excuse me, would you please take a seat?
Can I have an opportunity in a second?
I haven't given my point of order ruling to Alderman
Okay,
Zuko.
I accept that.
So Alderman Zuko, that's not a point of order because no point of order was raised with me at the time. So you can't make a point of order about the fact that someone didn't raise a point of order at the time.
A point of order on you, Lord Mayor.
Excuse me, Alderman Zuko, if you could just sit down. If you had been being interrupted by Councillor Harvey and you'd raised a point of order, I would have made a ruling on it because it is a point of order that you should not be being distracted or interrupted when you are speaking.
Okay, point of order, Lord Mayor. No one called a point of order on Alderman Briscoe, and he was.
That's not a point of order.
Well, you called Alderman Briscoe to task, in which you should have called Alderman Harvey to task.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I was making a
That's
personal
fairness.
comment to my neighbour here, yet you heard that and treated. You had to then draw attention to. I made a comment. No one brought it up as a point of order. You ruled my comment to my neighbour here was.
So sometimes the chair can under
I know,
a
you
separate...
can understand how partisan this can seem.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're talking about points of order which is separate to when...
No, not.
Well, there are separate provisions under the chairperson. If there's interjecting, the chairperson can raise that.
I wasn't interjecting.
Okay.
I was not interjecting.
So we'll go back to the substantive motion, please. So the substantive motion, Councillor Dudder, are you speaking to that?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'm speaking to the substantive motion. I want to firstly begin by commending Councillor Fox for the apology. I do appreciate that, and I think it is very courageous and someone of conviction to do that, and I appreciate that totally. Secondly, let me just deconstruct the motion and extrapolate some of the elements. There are three elements in the motion. The first element is that an urgent report be prepared. Now, I don't know why the rationale for an urgent report, because the urgency implies immediacy. It implies that something really needs to be done, because otherwise someone is in life-threatening situation, or we're losing a lot of money, or there is some problem with the environment, or there is a moral decay or bankruptcy in our meeting processes. Now, I don't somehow or the other see the logic of that. The other point that I want to make here is this. Now, if we take this as an urgent report, then this will have priority over other reports we have. And there again, I don't see strong reasons for that. The element number 2 in the motion states that it sets out protocols for chairperson. Now, already in my view, in my understanding, there are protocols already there. Protocols to me refers to the official procedure of rules governing our meeting. That's the definition of the word protocol. It's an official process, a procedure that we have that governs our meeting. Now, as per that, Rule 23(1)(e) states very clearly, and I read, a statement is made by a councillor speaking, the councillor raising the point of order believes is or is likely to be offensive to a councillor or to another person. Now, I acknowledge that there was a slight irregularity, but no one said anything. And even though we have the rule there very clearly stated, element 3 of the motions then states elected members using explicit or inappropriate language. Now again, it states very clearly in Rule 23(1)(e), a statement is made by a councillor, a statement meaning words that are used by the councillor. Now, copious times, a plethora of times, we have in this chamber heard points of order on many occasions. And yet, it is not simply the language that offends me many times, but it's the conduct, it's the tone, it's the attitude that is much more damaging, and that we should be taken notice of. So those are the three elements of the motion. Let me look at the rationale now. And there are 2 points, 2 elements in the rationale. Firstly, the rationale looks at the context. Now, in paragraph 1, it refers to item 4, where the chairperson, and it is very clearly referring to the Lord Mayor, it is stated there that the Lord Mayor was very certain, there was no ambiguity, and the voting procedure and the protocol that was used by the chair was demonstrated quite clearly. That is the context. Now, in that particular paragraph, only the chair could act. Only the chair could act and say it is out of order. We had no power as elected members to take that role. It was the role of the chair. Now, then a comparison is made further down in paragraph 3 and 4, that there was this F-bomb that was dropped. The F-bomb, when it was dropped, didn't insult anybody. No one said point of order. No one did. No one called point of order. Thank you. We all failed. I failed. We all failed. And now what we're doing, we're shifting the blame to the chair. Just the second element. We're shifting the blame to the chair. No one did. Now, for me, this is a principle of psychological projection, where we put blame to somebody else.
Point of order. Alderman, councillor.
Sorry, just wait.
I am going to look it
Alderman Zuko.
Councillor Dutta has no expertise to.
What is the point of order?
My point of order, he has actually made a comment in regards to someone's psychological behaviour.
Sorry, is that that the statement is likely to be offensive?
Absolutely.
To whom?
To me, in particular, because he's talking about psychological behaviour in respect of myself.
Alderman
Okay?
Zuko,
He's not a psychologist.
Alderman Zuko, I'll make a ruling on this. I will make a ruling on this, and can I just say that I do not believe that this would be likely to be offensive by a reasonable person, what Councillor Dutta said. It's his opinion, it disagrees with yours, Councillor Zuko, but the ruling on whether a statement is likely to be offensive to a councillor or another person is one that a judgment call I have to make. We did seek advice from the Director General, the local government director as a result of this. I think Alderman Sexton, you were interested in this topic about what would be offensive to a reasonable person. The Director of Local Government gave us some advice about that, and I will recirculate the Director of Local Government's advice. But it is a reasonable person test. Alderman Zuko, I'm just, if I could,
not a problem.
My point of order ruling. So it is, because this issue of points of order and what's offensive is a topic, I'm giving a bit more detail. We have sought advice from the Director of Local Government that I do need to apply the reasonable person test about whether it would be offensive to a reasonable person. And what Councillor Dutta said is his opinion, and I don't think to a reasonable person it would be seen as offensive. So that is my ruling. Okay, so Councillor Dutta, you'd run out of time anyway.
Can I ask for extension for 3 minutes, please?
3 minutes?
I'm asking, that's what the rule says. I'm only asking, that's all.
Moved by Councillor Sherlock, seconded by Councillor Harvey. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no.
No.
Okay, all those in favour.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and Lord Mayor.
Against.
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas and Alderman Briscoe. It's 6.
Can I have an extension of 1 minute or so?
Yeah. So moved.
Moved by Councillor Harvey,
Second.
seconded by Alderman Zuko. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okay, you've got 1 minute, Alderman, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a clarification. The words that I used, and you could check that out in the tape later, I said, you know, the principle of psychological projection. I didn't say behaviour. So all what I was saying there, that we, as it were, don't want to put the blame on you. I am taking the blame. We are responsible. People expected me to say something, and I did. I failed. That is what I'm saying. And it is for me to take the blame that I did not fulfill my responsibility when I should have. So for me, if you look at the 3 elements of the motion, the rationale behind the argument, it appears to be quite fallacious, in fact, because it's unsound, it's not logical, and therefore I have difficulty supporting this. Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe.
Question. A moment ago, you made a comment about me because I was making a comment, not an interjection. I made a comment to my neighbour. You ruled that that was inappropriate without a...
I just asked you to not make general comments.
In other words, you ruled.
Well, you'd already spoken. It wasn't part of the debate, and I can make that. I can
I
make some general comments.
I was talking to my neighbour.
Thank you. I've answered your question.
No, the
Please
question
sit down.
is, no, I haven't asked the question yet.
You did.
No, I had, that was the background. Thank you.
Second question, what is it?
The first question is that the comment that's just been made by Councillor Dutta, that an individual council member had to bring up a point of order before the chair could rule on people's conduct or behaviour or words. Is that correct?
I'll take that on notice.
Thank you.
If you could put that in writing to Alderman Briscoe, and then I'll take it on notice.
Me?
Okay, thank you. So any further discussion? Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I didn't anticipate this would bring out the length of debate, but it has. But it's been very interesting, informative as always. Look, I'll be very brief. I guess, look, when I was reading the agenda for tonight, when I saw this motion, to me it's a classic sort of fix forward. At the time, I, like Councillor Dutta, didn't say anything, didn't stand up. I'll be honest, I wasn't offended by the use of that language. It might be a generational thing, I'm not sure. However, I guess our world has changed a little bit. I did receive, not from that meeting, but a different one, a friend of mine who had the meeting streaming. And literally it was a cute little photo because it was a 4-year-old watching a meeting, and you know, he was texting me saying, oh look, you know, you wouldn't believe it, he's actually interested in local government. And I think, you know, I sometimes forget that these are now broadcasts. And so our audience isn't necessarily adults who have chosen of their own volition to come here and observe proceedings, of which there might be a few listening online. But it's also general members of community and you know, the sort of decorum that we would have in a classroom, for instance, or in the public is sort of much more expected now. But look, as I said at the time, I didn't do it because I didn't personally find it offensive. But clearly some people did. I did receive an email following up. Look, I don't want to dwell on the incident. I think that's, if people want to rewatch that tape, they can. But look, in my mind, what I'm being asked today in terms of this motion, you know, is it a good thing to us to ask the officers to do this? I think yes, and I know that it was brought up in the debate in regards to the urgency. I sort of do this is urgent, not in terms of, you know, this is the most important pressing matter, but in terms of where we are in the cycle. We do have elections coming up in October. As I said, the world has changed, it's now all broadcast. I think potentially there will be some benefit to come out of this. Look, potentially when the report comes back, it'll be up to us to decide, but we might want to even send it to a committee so we can have the officers sitting around a table and really, you know, get into the nuts and bolts of hopefully what is some really good advice that comes back. As you know, I don't normally chair meetings, but it has happened. You know, we have members away and I was asked to take the chair, and sometimes having protocols at hand can be very helpful. And so I think there is a you know, a need, if you like, there. And I think as well, it potentially is going to be informative for us as elected members, but also for the officers and potentially for the new members of council once the elections happen in October. So look, you know, I think ultimately, will there be work involved? Would there potentially be external legal advice and trying to stuff that's been done? Yes, that's what we're asking here, but I think there is going to be a benefit at the end of it. So I find myself supporting ultimately the production of this advice because I think it will be helpful ultimately going forward for you as Lord Mayor if you run again, if you're successful, but also for any other Lord Mayor, any other Chair, any other member who, and even down to me, the lowest of the pecking order, it does happen that you are asked to chair meetings. And so, you know, as I said, the world has changed, things are now broadcast, it does go to a much wider audience. We have robust debate in this chamber, we have issues that are very divisive, but, you know, I think ultimately if we can have more, quote, civil meetings, it's better for everyone involved, and ultimately the best person to arrange civil meetings and procedures is the chair of the meeting. And what helps the chairs of meetings? Ultimately, protocols and guidance in regards to, well, this scenario comes up, what is appropriate action? And I think that's what this is asking for, and I think it'll be a really good thing going forward. I mean, who knows, we might be dealing with incredibly divisive issues in, you know, this council in 20 years' time might be dealing with something hugely divisive, cable car going from, you know, the waterfront up a mountain or something, who knows. But, and if we have these protocols in hand, I think it'll help. So look, I find myself supporting it, but again, it's been a very informative debate. Thanks.
Further discussion? Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'll start by echoing what Councillor Dutta said and commending Councillor Fox on apologising for her comments. I actually missed the comment myself and didn't hear it at the time, but I think that said, this needs to not be taken as a response to something that happened 2 weeks ago. It needs to be taken as a going forward. And the Minister Street, the local government minister, said when the debate and comments around compulsory voting came around, that the decisions and issues that pop up on council and the decisions that we make are as important, sometimes more important than the decisions that state and federal parliaments make, and oftentimes they affect the everyday person more directly and quicker. And to that, I think it's important that we take an equally introspective look at how we conduct our meetings. There's obviously particular rules about how parliaments conduct their meetings, and parliaments themselves are known to be robust, sometimes more robust than what this chamber can be. And I think to try and regulate the full breadth of what could be inappropriate behaviour might have too much of a chilling effect on our ability to freely debate. But there are certain things that are objectively inappropriate, certain especially explicit languages. But there's other comments that are made, and you hear it in other chambers and other jurisdictions where, you know, name calling, for instance, while they might not be explicit, they are still inappropriate. So I think it is a good idea for us to strengthen or get some proper clarity on what the procedures are around this sort of behaviour, these sort of terminologies, because I think at the end of the day, as was said, there's more people watching us and listening to us than ever before. As well as that, the journalists have greater access to what we say, so it's more likely to be reported what's said in our debates. And we've seen in other councils, and I suppose King is probably the extreme example of this, but when there is inappropriate behaviour, inappropriate language used in meetings, these are increasingly likely to get reported on, and it does reflect on the council. So, similar to what I said in regards to the amendment that we previously discussed, this shouldn't be taken to be a reflection of any particular person or any particular incident. I think it's great that Councillor Fox apologised, so we can put that aside and move past this. This is a separate issue, and I think it's something that's reflective of the entire council. So I think it is a good idea. I think it's good for us to improve the way that we conduct our meetings, and I think, as Councillor Harvey said, it's something that would potentially include not just profanities but also other behaviour that would objectively be deemed to be inappropriate, and I think that would only result in a better reputation for this council.
Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, you know, at various different points that people have spoken, I do agree with what's been said. For example, what Councillor Coates said, and also what Alderman Baracus has said as well. My main issue, though, with this particular motion is the urgent report being required for the use of direct and explicit or inappropriate language. And I think what's already been stated around the table at the moment is that, you know, there are certain behaviours that are actually far more offensive. During my very small time here on council, I think we actually had somebody who came into the chamber from the public who actually asked us about certain behaviours of male aldermen in this particular chamber and how that's not even dealt with. That's offensive. We have 4-year-olds looking at that stuff as well. We have individuals who sit there on their phones and disrupt the chamber completely and with loud noises, whatever is going on. It just happened tonight. It's happened previously. Nobody calls a point of order on that. I don't think that's extremely great behaviour, and I don't think it's reflective of who we are, and we are representatives of our community. I also, like Councillor Coates, wasn't offended by the comment at all, and I also would like to commend Councillor Fox for actually apologising for it. But there are far more extreme behaviours that have gone on in this chamber that are far more offensive. I've been called a point of order for talking about the shenanigans in this chamber reflecting monkeys in a zoo. There's other points of behaviour that have been called out in this chamber just because somebody's interrupting. But that is the thing that we get to do as elected members. We, sitting around this chamber, that is the protocol. We get to say something's offensive to us. It is the chair who rules on that point of order. There are 4 or 5 different elements that can make a point of order on which the chair will rule. That is our issue to deal with as elected members. And nobody on that night said anything. That is our responsibility. None of us raised it. Yet I am more than certain that every single person around this table stands up and calls a point of order every time they're offended about something. Someone said something. Alderman Briscoe just said before, what did he say that was actually quietly said but I overheard it? Oh look, everybody's voting along party lines. That's what was said. Nobody stood up and said point of order on that. No. Right?
Private comment.
It wasn't a private comment, it was overheard. Point of order, you're interrupting me while I talk.
Yeah, that is.
I'd like you to rule on that, Lord Mayor.
Please don't interrupt while a councillor is speaking.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And that's the fact of the matter. We get to do what I just did, which is call a point of order when we don't agree with something on the 4 or 5 grounds that a point of order can be called upon. And offensive is one of them. But we all showed by our very behaviour and our very actions that we weren't offended at all. Now, I'll just finish. Now, when we're talking about the public actually viewing our behaviour, we're actually talking about behaviours as well. And I think that is far more important. That causes a lot more stress, as has already been said around the table by Councillor Harvey and various other individuals that have spoken today. So I'm really sorry. I don't agree with this particular motion at all, setting out protocols of the chairperson around elected member use of direct or explicit or inappropriate language. Actually, that's not the chairperson's role when it comes to points of order. They simply rule on it. It is our job. This is our responsibility, and it is not our job to pass off this responsibility on the chairperson who has to rule on a point of order. We as elected members cannot rule on a point of order. But if you're offended by something, raise it. It's as simple as that. And I just see this as perhaps a motion. Sorry, once again, as I think Alderman Baracus and Alderman Zuko pointed out, is it an election year? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to the motion.
Sorry, I think you...
I've spoke to the amendment. I raised the amendment. Look, I think we're... Thank you very much, Councillor Sherlock, because I certainly wasn't going to speak. On the night, we were on Zoom, I think, from memory, and it hit me next morning. I asked myself during the night, did I hear that? I could ask myself because I was actually in a retreat and couldn't speak to anyone else. But the reality is, I was offended, and it stayed with me for several days. And it's not a case of us ruling whether profanity or derogatory commentary by anybody, whether they're in the gallery, at the officers' table, on the, I was going to say the bench, on the top table, it doesn't matter. There is a public perception of what is appropriate in a public place. And I don't care whether you can try to associate other behaviour as being worse than profanity. It was profanity, and I don't believe that it is still accepted in a parliament or a local government of Australia for someone to use the F word. I don't care whether I'm old or young. I asked several people, and people were offended. So let's not try to associate behaviour, other behaviour, and say, oh, that's even worse than those words, because there's a lot of the public that does listen to this chamber, and a lot of the public would have been as shocked as I was that night. And I appreciate the councillor has apologised, but let's not belittle the fact that if that word is said again, or any other word of a similar nature, I'm walking out, because it's not where I want to be. And let's not belittle the fact of a word like that being used in this chamber. I'm not going to put up with it, I hate the way you've tried to personalise other people's behaviour, treat it as a schoolyard in which we were delinquent children, because that word should never have been used, and it should never be used again until someone tells me that out there in public land it's okay to use it in any parliament or any local government in this country.
Well, may I have a personal explanation, if I may?
I'll just check on that because I don't think that's relevant at the moment. Sorry, Alderman Zuko, if you could just sit down for a moment. Section 24(1) allows for a personal explanation at the meeting. The chairperson of a meeting may allow a councillor to explain a matter of a personal nature in the absence of a motion on the matter, if, in the opinion of the chairperson, it is in the interests of the councillor and the council or the committee to do so. But it's about the motion in front of us. I'm just not sure that
it's not about the motion in front of us. It's about something that was said in a ruling that you made.
Alderman Zuko, you will have a moment to sum up the whole motion. You will have a chance. Then there's just
so
no
you
need.
deny me my personal explanation?
I am.
Thank you.
I don't think we need it.
It's okay. No problem. No, don't have to go on.
No. Sorry, I would like to just explain my decision, if I may, as chairperson, Alderman Zuko, and that is that in a moment you will have time to sum up your motion in detail, and you can go through all of these issues and your personal explanations then. So you've got plenty of opportunity.
I want clarification in the nature that I'm asking for a personal explanation has nothing to do with the motion or my summing up.
Thank you. Deputy Lord Mayor, did you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Well, we've had a whole gamut of behaviours tonight, haven't we? And I think the chance tonight with the motion, and I thank Alderman Zuko for giving us the chance to look at this motion and to discuss it. And everybody, I think, has had a chance to discuss it, apart from you, Lord Mayor. But I think this gives us an opportunity to reflect. We reflect on good governance, and we reflect on our own behaviours and what we might say. And I appreciate Councillor Fox's apology in relation to the other night. None of us, as has been explained, called a point of order. We didn't do that. For whatever reason, we didn't do it, but that is part of meeting procedures, that we do have that there as an opportunity to bring a point of order and have that point of order ruled on by the chair. Points of order are usually ruled on by the chair, but not in this council. We usually get points of order not ruled on, not necessarily by the chair, but by other other people around the council table, and that's not how it works. That's really not how it should work. So, you know, like it's a chance to reflect on that, I think, in relation to how we act around this chamber, how we act respectfully around this chamber. Certainly, we've heard from the Lord Mayor that other councils don't seem to have a problem with points of order. What's that? You know, it's hardly ever touched upon, but not at this council, which, for whatever reason, it's not necessarily an expletive. It's more, in my opinion, that we have really poor behaviour around this table, and it's a really poor reflection, unfortunately, on this council. No wonder we're in the paper so much. I don't agree with Alderman Thomas. I think poor behaviour is just as bad as inflammatory language, and particularly the way that we should, as a council, work. It's not a political party versus another. It's not sides versus another. We don't have the Westminster system around this table, and that's. And why we don't is that we all can bring our opinions for discussion and respectful discussion, which is often missing. So, you know, the types of disrespectful behaviour, proffering, how points of order might be considered, being ignored, being overlooked or talked over, quite often occurs. And I guess, you know, I'm not saying that I'm perfect or otherwise in this, but we, as Councillor Sherlock has said, we did have public questions. I think we had a couple of public questions around elected member behaviour. I heard a governance expert when I was overseas on my holidays, heard a governance expert talking about poor behaviour, particularly towards women in positions of mayor and deputy mayor. And whilst the comment was brought up around another council and another councillor's behaviour, boy, do we see some disrespectful behaviour, and I think that's more offensive in lots of ways than what we have here. So we have, and Councillor Harvey brought up that erosion of mayors time and time and time and time again. I've seen so much of it occur.
30 seconds, Deputy.
Lord Mayor, can I have an extension of 2 minutes, please?
Moved by Councillor Dutta, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. That's 2 minutes extra.
Thank you. Thank you. So we, oh, sorry, I've lost my train of thought, Lord Mayor, but I just feel that we have a chance tonight to be a lot more reflective on how we operate and how we can do the best for our community. Is it squabbling around the table? Is it being disrespectful? Is it showing examples to 4-year-olds or anybody watching online and taking an interest or wanting to stand for local government? Do they want to be a part of this council? Well, you know, you'd have to wonder, and really getting that mixture of people around the table is really critical in my mind to be able to do it. So in the motion's rationale, it describes, I think Alderman Zuko suggested that he was texting during the meeting to another council elected member. What kind of behaviour is that? You know, how can we make...
Clarification, Lord Mayor, if I may, please. That's impugning me.
I'm sorry.
Okay, don't worry. I'll leave it for my summing up.
That's a good time to do it. Thank you.
My point around how we behave and how we interact as a council really, you know, raises my concerns. And if we can't reflect on how we're operating as a council, then, you know, I think we have to have a really hard look at ourselves as to how we're doing this. We've just had a federal election. The federal election was brought on an incredible result. We had a whole lot of Teal members, and the government was thrown out, and out of that, I think there were a number of important matters that were covered and which were reflected in. People don't want the same sort of politics done the same way. They want to see a more respectful discourse so that we can get results. They're sick and tired of how politics has been played, and this is what we're seeing here. So I think that this is a good chance for reflection, but I certainly won't be supporting this motion.
Further discussion? I think that's pretty much almost, yeah. There's no further discussion. I'll just say a few words. Look, I think it's been an interesting discussion broadly about our meetings and some of the issues around meeting procedures. You know, if the motion had been something focused on our meeting procedures more broadly and building awareness of what the meeting procedures do say and don't say, and how we can run effective meetings, I would have supported it, because I do use these and I do take them seriously, and I don't appreciate being called out on them constantly, because I have, you know, it is that there are complexities to our meeting procedures, and it does take some time to get used to them as a mayor, but I've worked hard and I've sought advice on many occasions, and I do take them seriously, and I do try as best I can to administer them fairly. And I think, you know, I'm not saying again that I do all the time, but I try as hard as I can, and I'm certainly open to any discussion that you might have. You're welcome to give me a call, send me an email if you think that I haven't done something correctly or fairly. But this motion is not, I don't think is fair play, because it does focus very much on one particular incident. It focuses, the rationale is totally targeted personally at myself and Councillor Fox. There's a lot of conjecture in here about suggesting that Councillor Fox had premeditated something. It puts in here about me stuttering. I mean, it's a very personalised and patronising motion that is designed to suggest that I don't know how to chair a meeting, which I've got to say is a message that I've received from certain elected members on numerous occasions. Most meetings, that kind of suggestion that I don't know what I'm doing as chairing a meeting comes up. You know, I think the point's already been raised by other elected members that in this particular case, all elected members have the tools available to them under the meeting procedures, which is a point of order. I do follow the points of order and what they can and can't cover. But if any elected member had said to me on that night, point of order, Chair, I believe that the use of that language will be likely to be offensive to the general public, it is offensive to me and another individual, then I would have made a ruling on that point of order at that time. And that is the tool that is available to us. We don't need additional protocols for me to start intervening on people's, whether, you know, I personally, you know, think that someone's use of a particular sort of language is right or not. It's a very fair system at the moment that you have all of you have the ability to raise a point of order, and I have to make a fair ruling on that as best I can. Now, I will recirculate to all elected members the advice that we did seek from the Director of Local Government about what I should deem as offensive, likely to be offensive, because that is a subjective call, and I have to call that. I do think that the use of language like that would be seen as offensive in some situations, particularly if it's targeting a particular person. But the Director of Local Government gave us advice on that issue of what should we see as offensive. And there was quite a good detailed letter a few years ago, and I'll recirculate that so that is the advice I am using when I'm making a ruling on your points of order because you believe something that's been said in this meeting is offensive. So the tools are there. We don't need additional protocols. I don't need a report to tell me how to run the meetings. I think I'm doing the best job I can, and I think generally a pretty good job with the use of the existing meeting procedures. And I think some of these other sort of protocols or whatever else is being suggested in this particular case are very targeted and have been personalised, and I find quite patronising in terms of the rationale. So I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, I move under section 20.
This
1A that the motion be put. Thank you. We are wasting.
Last time. I think it's inappropriate, Lord Mayor.
I understand. It is a procedural motion. It is a procedural motion, so I need to put it as
so
fairness.
Case of clarification, if it is moved that the person who has the right of reply will not be able to have a right of reply, so the summing up, is that correct if this motion is accepted?
Motion, so it does if the council votes for it, then it would stop
so would deny the right to Alderman Zurko
yes.
To clarify the things before. Yeah. No, I'm just asking, has it been seconded?
I'm just going to check that. Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Okay. All those in favour, that's a procedural motion to just put the motion now, following this debate. All those in favour say aye. Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Councillor Dutta and Councillor Fox.
And all those against?
Alderman Zurko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. It's lost Lord Mayor, 2 votes to 10.
Talk about...
Alderman Zurko, so now you have your chance to sum up. You have a 3 minutes.
Lord Mayor, and I'm going to ask for a 2-minute extension. Lord Mayor, fairness and equity is what I'm here about. This is all about fairness and equity. My actually summary of the motion there, Lord Mayor, is fairness and equity, and it was, to my point of view, demonstrated tonight when Councillor Harvey interjected and the Chair did not interject, and Councillor Briscoe spoke and the Chair interjected. The point is, Lord Mayor, you said about stuttering. I'm attacking you. Just check the video. The video in itself is very, very clear in the sense of what occurred immediately after. The Deputy talks about texting. I actually texted a fellow elected member and said, did I just hear what I heard? That's all I was asking. Did I hear the F-bomb dropped in this chamber in my 30 years of being here? It's never been dropped. Now, Councillor Harvey talks about inappropriate, a number of people talk about inappropriate behaviour. Well, there was a period there where Councillor Harvey used to, on a regular basis, at least 4 or 5 or 6 times a night when I get up to speak, would call a point of order on just about everything. To the point is he talks about a previous Lord Mayor. Well, let's talk about former Lord Mayor Valentine, in which I'm sure it was Councillor Harvey and the Deputy Lord Mayor who spoke to me about the manner in which the Lord Mayor acted, and we need to develop a Lord Mayor's protocol. I was the one that went and spoke to the Lord Mayor at the time, right, that there is a number of elected members who were talking about a Lord Mayor's protocol. All the elected members at the time actually supported the Lord Mayor in the Lord Mayor's protocol at the time. So why was a Lord Mayor's protocol developed under the Valentine regime in which there was 1, 2, 3, 4, you were here at the time, I'm not sure, Councillor Harvey. So we developed a protocol at the time in respect of what is the best way for the Lord Mayor to move forward. Mind you, I'm fully aware that the current Lord Mayor was provided that protocol and didn't want to sign it, which is fine enough, up the prerogative of the Lord Mayor. I remember Alderman Thomas as Lord Mayor did so. Again, I want to go back to its fairness and equity. We all should be treated fairly. Now, on the night...
It is 30 seconds.
I'll seek 2 minutes, please.
Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by councillor Sherlock. All those in favour say aye.
Just a question of clarification, Lord Mayor. I'm wanting a clarification. If there is a right to reply for 3 minutes, under that rule, is an extension granted as well?
I might just need to seek some advice.
Is a right to reply, I'm saying.
It's to the Lord Mayor, the meeting has the ability to grant that extension if it so wishes.
Okay, thank you.
So that's been granted, but I just remind Alderman Zuko that you're not to introduce any new information in exercising the right of your...
I don't want my time to start, but I would assume you're talking about the protocol.
No, I'm talking about section 22(5)(b). Thanks.
Oh, well, I haven't introduced anything new anyway.
Just
okay. I will commend Councillor Fox in apologising. I've been actually one over the years that has also apologised if I believe that I've been had any inappropriate behaviour. And I recall where the deputy's sitting, there was a former Deputy Lord Mayor in respect of Alderman Rozika. In one night, in heavy debate on a planning matter, right, Alderman Rozika, it was debate on the item, Alderman Rozika left the room crying. It wasn't my fault. Right?
I'm just saying, is that new information?
I'm talking about, the deputy's talking about behaviours and apologies. That's what I'm thinking. So I didn't interject anyone. So far I've been interjected twice. That's another interjection, Lord Mayor, take it off my time. But what I did at the next meeting, right, I got up at the start of the meeting, Lord Mayor, and I apologised for anything that may have upset the Deputy Lord Mayor. I believe that if I do something wrong in this chamber that's inappropriate or wrong or whatever have you, I have apologised, just like Councillor Fox did tonight. But I've got to say, there have been elected members round this table who have attacked me and thinking because I'm Mr. Tough that I don't have feelings. Don't worry, I'm not as tough inside as you might think it is. But I've had to write to certain elected members in respect of their behaviour to me, and I've let it go. Now, I think it's about time that there's some fairness and equity in here. This is what it's about. I received 2 complaints. Then I received a question. What is the protocol on swearing? I looked at the meeting procedures, they're not there. Yes, we have the tool of points of order, but that particular night, Lord Mayor, I had raised a procedural motion. I felt absolutely deflated in the manner you spoke to me that night. The next item, which I wanted to put forward as a deferral, I did not want to say so. I actually was so deflated that night because I get sick and tired of being pushed down as if I don't know what I'm talking about in this chamber. And I think it's time that each and every elected member got treated equally, as was demonstrated tonight, where 2 sets of rules were used. The chair has the ability to ensure behaviour is carried out in an appropriate manner, whether it's swearing or not. And if you don't believe there was stuttering, listen to the tape.
Okay, so I will put that, but I will just mention, Councillor Sherlock, just while we're talking about meeting procedures, that if you had been concerned about Alderman Zuko raising new information, you would have had to done a point of order under item D, which is that, sorry, item C, which is that you're of the opinion that a meeting procedure contrary to the Act or these regulations. So that would have been it. So,
Thanks for
you have to
educating
raise
me.
a point of order if you're going to interject. Thank you. Okay, so I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Again say no. No. Show of hands. All those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates, Alderman Baracus, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
I don't dare make a
And
comment.
against.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. That's tied Lord Mayor, 6 votes all, so the motion's lost.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 13. Councillor Harvey, your e-scooter card.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm sorry there's not much more of a segue over to this one, but anyway, e-scooters we're on to now. So this came about, Lord Mayor, because of a previous motion. I'll move the item first. Yep.
It's been moved and seconded by Alderman Baracus.
previously we had a motion to look and to prepare an urgent report on, or an urgent consultation with relevant disabled and senior associations, including the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner, Tas Police, and so on, regarding the use of scooters on public footpaths. So that engagement consultation process happened, and the outcome of that is these 4 recommendations. The council officers continue to investigate the viability of creating more mixed-use micro-mobility lanes in inner city corridors. Council officers work with e-scooter operators, Beam and Neuron, as well as other relevant organisations in the city to create opportunities for training and safety awareness for senior Tasmanians. Part 3, council officers attend the series of roundtable discussions, discussion forums convened by the Department of State Growth regarding e-scooters, and that any outcome arising from the roundtable relevant to the council's e-scooter trial be included in the e-scooter trial assessment report to be prepared upon completion of the trial. And part 4, which came up on the night through the committee process, the City's Access Advisory Committee be requested to consider an action as appropriate, the inequity and legislation covering mobility scooters and e-scooters. So there is a bit of a discrepancy in the speed of e-scooters versus mobility scooters. They're limited to a much slower speed, and I have no view on it other than we're seeking some guidance about why mobility scooters travel slower, even though they're different functions to some degree. But the committee was interested in understanding, the difference in speeds and uses of the 2 different types of mobility options. But I commend the recommendation. I think the council did a good job in engaging as per the recommendation that we do so.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, it's good to see that motion that Marty and I moved. Marty moved and I seconded. Is starting to have fruition to make these scooters a lot safer. I have some concerns about part 2, to create opportunities for training and safety awareness for senior Tasmanians. So the senior Tasmanians are going to be trained to avoid them, or is it training so they can use them safely? When I look around the town, the people who are using the scooters inappropriately without helmets, doubling up, kids on them, are actually quite young people. So really it's training and safety awareness for all Tasmanians, not only senior Tasmanians. So perhaps a clarification we'll seek from the chair of that wording, which is a little bit unclear. Is it safety training for us seniors who have to get out of the way as they scoot past us? And
as per the previous motion, I'll just mention it again. The council, in conjunction with e-scooter providers, undertake urgent consultation with relevant disabled and senior associations. So it was specific. The motion that was put was specifically to the elderly and disability associations.
Thank you. So the training is surely well. Anyway, I'd like to think that we continue. I've noticed there's some safety and training being provided by both the operators. I've seen some of them down the wharf and even down Salamanca Way too, that they have these things set out to train. Mm-hmm. This is a question, so my time should stop. I asked some time ago what fees have been paid so far by these scooter companies. I was assured that that answer would be provided to me in a timely manner. It has not been. So I don't know whether our CEO is still on. Yes, our CEO is still there. I looked through our budget papers. I can't find those fees. So what fees have been paid so far by the scooter companies to the council? Through you, Chair.
CEO, would you like to respond to that question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Through to you, Alderman Briscoe. As we've mentioned previously, it is subject to commercial in confidence just around the contractual agreement between council and those providers. However, I am happy to provide elected members with an update on fees, I guess, received by council thus far in terms of the life of the contract. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, so I will seek that advice from officers and provide it to elected members in confidence in accordance with our contractual obligations with the companies. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, CEO, for that answer. That answer was given to me some time ago as well and hasn't been provided, which is a bit of a shame. So I'm looking forward to the report, the big report, because we know there are considerable concerns about e-scooters. I've noticed other jurisdictions are now bringing in tighter regulations, and I think one of the regulations that needs to be brought in, if Hobart can't bring it in, the state has to bring it in, where we have particular places where they are parked and where they are, you can get on them, because when you look around the city, and I walk around the city and drive around the city and the suburbs, they're everywhere, and some of our footpaths are narrow, and so they are taking up space on the footpath. Yet apparently at the moment they're quite legal to do that. Nothing else can block footpaths, but these e-scooters can. So that's something I'm hoping to look forward to, that we do have changes in our policy when we come with this so-called trial, comes to an end. Presumably that report will be before council before the end of this council. Can I ask that question? My time should stop.
CEO, Alderman Briscoe, you can be rest assured that your time does stop when you ask a question. You don't need to.
Just making sure. Thank you, Chair.
Through you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, and Alderman Briscoe again. Look, I understand that is the case, that it will be prior to the end of this council term, so prior to October, Lord Mayor.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe, I'm just wondering, did you want to move an amendment, because item 1 talks about the viability of creating more mixed mobility lanes? You could add in and parking, dedicated parking spaces.
Oh, look, I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to do that. And I'd like, if I'm going to move an amendment, training and safety awareness for senior Tasmanians and others in part 2.
And did you want to add the thing about the dedicated parking spaces?
Yes, I said that, yes.
Is someone who would like to second Councillor Sherlock?
Appreciate.
Okay. Yes.
You got amendments. I'm going to sit down because I want to speak to the motion.
Yeah. Okay. Would anyone like to speak on that? Those 2 small amendments from Alderman Briscoe? No. I'll put that then.
Look, just quickly, there is a program for others, and the original motion that brought about this report and recommendation was about senior citizens and disabled people. So specifically, we've already got that covered. So the others is already ongoing, and you would have noticed a campaign that started not that long ago. What's the name of our scooter campaign through you, Chair?
Through the Jack
Yeah, with the jack jumpers as well. So there is an ongoing campaign to educate the broader public about the use of e-scooters. So your amendment is not necessarily the way to go.
Look, I think I've been convinced, if that's okay, the Lord Mayor, to remove that and others, if I'm assured that there are ongoing campaigns for others.
Yes, I can assure you the others are getting a campaign too, yes.
So Alderman Briscoe, is just that bit you wanted to withdraw?
Number 1, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on the amendment? No? Okay, I'll put the 1 amendment about adding the words "and dedicated parking spaces." All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Now back to the substantive motion.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I've got 2 questions. My first question is, who is paying for the marketing campaign with the jack jumpers? Through you to the appropriate officer, please.
Ms. Allen? Director Allen?
Through you, Lord Mayor. The cost of that campaign is split equally between ourselves and Neuron and Beam. So my recollection is the total cost of the Scoot Smart Hobart campaign is in the order of $60,000, and each of the parties have made an equal contribution.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Lord Mayor, I'll get to that in a moment. In regards to the report, as I said, my eyes aren't the best these days. Have I missed anything in regards to the speed limits of the e-scooters. Is it in the report or not, Lord Mayor? Can someone answer that?
Director, would you like to answer that? This is the state government regulated speed limits.
No, it's not state government. It's just, what are they? What they are?
Sorry, I might just need a clarification.
I'll ask the question again. What is the current speed limit of the e-scooters on our footpaths?
So the speed limit is variable depending on where the scooters are being used. So through geofencing, they are limited in different areas. I don't actually have those figures available to me tonight, but I'm happy to provide that information.
Okay. All right, I'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to move an amendment, Lord Mayor, and that's in regards to part 2. After the word safety awareness and any further input on the trial by and for senior Tasmanians. What I'd like that to do is we work with the e-scooter operators and look at the training and safety, but also any other input that our senior Tasmanians are able to provide, right, to this trial. Because I believe that's one of the areas where we have disenfranchised the community, and I'll move that as an amendment, and I'll sit down after I've spoken generally. Yes, it's all right, you get the advice. In regards to the cost of marketing, the question that we all should ask ourselves, if this was a small business in the city wanting to do something, would this council provide funding for that organisation to put out marketing so that business could make money? I don't think so. I find it that this is the company that wants to have the trial, the companies that want to have the trial. We shouldn't be, our ratepayers shouldn't be the ones partaking and paying for a trial and also paying for any marketing to educate these people who are breaching the laws. And I was in Salamanca today, 3 young people, would have been lucky to be 14, and a parent. I've got to say, they're all wearing helmets, which is fantastic. It's good to see that that's happening. But 3 of them breaching the law, the parent not. Should it be the ratepayers of Hobart paying for the marketing exercise? Even though we're getting paid for them to use our facilities, so do people at Salamanca pay for the facilities. So do people at the Taste of Tasmania. Or a business in the middle of the city. They're using our facilities, they're using our footpaths and our roads. But would we go into a joint marketing campaign? I'm sorry, I don't gel with that, I don't support that. That concerns me. The other concern I have is, already all around the country, a lot of the capital cities have changed their speed limits, but we still have a 25-kilometre speed limit. Most cities, Melbourne and others, have reduced their speed limits from 20 down to 15. And at the moment, Queensland's actually seriously looking at these scooters and what they do and they don't do with them. I'm not going to move an amendment here because, again, I get tired sometimes because of things that I try and do around this table, because it's not about me, I don't really care. To me, it's very concerning that that we aren't looking at what other cities are doing with these e-scooters. Now, I get it so many times around this table that, oh, the City of Melbourne's doing X, the City of Launceston's doing Y, and whatever have you, but yet no one has taken on board what other cities around the country have done with reducing their speed limits of these e-scooters. Brisbane's done it, Melbourne's done it. So those people that want to preach to me and around this table that say, let's look at what other cities are doing, we need to. I know the geotechnical situations happening on certain that's happening, but I think what we should be doing is looking at a maximum speed limit in similar light to others, and it should be 15 kilometres an hour. I'm not going to move it. I just mentioned it. you know, you never know, I might get someone to do it like I did a few weeks ago when I didn't want to move another deferral. But Lord Mayor, I've moved that amendment. You can ask for a seconder or not. And the reasons why I'd like that is because the disabled and the people that our disability personnel on our that walk our streets are being disenfranchised. Our senior citizens are being disenfranchised, and I want to get input back from them in respect of this awareness and safety and training. Are they happy with it? Is this what they want? And that, because I think it's very, very important. I'll sit down, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
All right, so we've got an amendment from Alderman Zuko. We need a seconder, seconded by Alderman Thomas. It's basically to add the words after safety awareness and any further input or on the trial by and for, by and then we've got for senior Tasmanians. Is that right?
Yeah, senior and I want to try and get the right word about disability.
Tasmanians and disability groups.
And disability groups. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
So would you like to speak to the amendment?
I want to ask a question, if I may, Lord Mayor, just in relation to what sort of consultation has already occurred with the Access Advisory Committee, with specific public information sessions designed to discuss with the disability community.
Question? Yeah. So what is the question? The question is what, it's probably all in the report, so I'm not sure whether everyone's read the report from City Institute. But
well, that's why, but here we have an amendment to say that we need to do this.
Ms Allen, can you explain the, what the consultation with disability and senior Australian groups has been?
Sure. So, as requested by Council, we organised two forums. One was the Seniors Forum, which we conducted out at Mavor's house. And one of the outcomes of that forum, I think the two forums are referred to in the paper. One of the outcomes of that forum was that there were some seniors representatives at the group that were looking for some more information about scooters and how they worked and how to use them. So I believe that's the background to that recommendation. We also conducted a forum at Town Hall with a number of disability advocates. So that again was a motion put through Council. So we had a number of representatives came to give us feedback on the nature of the trial. There is a further review point planned in a couple of months, and then one at the conclusion of the trial. Also, the Department of State Growth is conducting its own e-scooter consultation around the enabling legislation for e-scooters.
May I clarify what my intent is?
With the, sorry, was it a further question?
And I just want to, the question was asked about consultation. This is not about consultation. My amendment is, so to clarify, my amendment is not about consultation. Any further input on the trial by and for these people. I'm saying, that's what I'm saying, not to go out and consult with them. Any further input they may wish to bring forward.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Just a further question. So we have a dedicated web page, do we not, in relation to e-scooters? And any sort of things can be brought up through that existing web page?
Ellen.
Yeah, we do have some information on our website, and obviously we receive a significant number of representations and correspondence to the team. We are currently working with our communications team to provide some more real-time information about the e-scooter trial. So we're hoping to have more public access information available if that's the nature of your question.
Thank you.
So any further discussion on Alderman Zuko's amendment, please? Councillor Dutta?
Lord Mayor, I just have a question, not regards to the amendment. The statement was made about the expenditure of 60,030. Who approved that contribution?
CEO, did you want to answer that, or a director?
Sorry, through you, Lord Mayor, I didn't quite catch the end of that question.
Sorry, it's a
So
question from Councillor Dutta about the approval of the campaign, the Scoot Smart campaign, and the expenditure on it.
Right, so through you, Lord Mayor, to Councillor Dutta. So it was actually in one of the reports that we prepared for Council, just around the safety campaign and so on, that we needed to engage with. But in terms of the amount, the approval of that amount, it sits within the delegations of officers, Lord Mayor, in line with the agreement that was entered into with the contractors at the time. But as I said, also in subsequent reports around needing to engage in sort of safety awareness campaigns and so on. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Okay, so we've got any further discussion on Alderman Zuko's amendment? I might just, if no further discussion, I might just quickly ask the Director, is there any major challenge with taking on this amendment in terms of getting further input from seniors and disability groups? Is it within what you were planning to do?
Yeah, no, Lord Mayor, there's no challenges at all. As I mentioned, we are planning to engage on a couple more occasions with disability groups and age groups, so I foresee no challenges.
Okay. So I'll put Alderman... do we have a seconder for Alderman Zuko's amendment? Alderman Thomas. All those in favour of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okay, we're going back to the substantive motion. We've now had the two amendments. Any further discussion? Or Councillor Coates?
Look, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, at the outset, I guess I'd thank the officers. I think they've done a reading through the detail of the guts of the report from the minutes of a committee meeting, from the agenda of a committee meeting, and I think they've done a very good job here. It was interesting to note they managed to get a vigilante from the Victorian, I'm joking because that was her name, but someone from the Victorian Department of Transport came along, which I thought was very fascinating to get an experience from another jurisdiction. Obviously in Tasmania it still is a trial and it still has a ways to go. Anecdotally, I think the behaviour we see now is far, far better than it was when it first launched, albeit in some ways it probably has a way to go. Look, I would share Alderman Zuko's concerns in regards to expenditure of money, arguably where potentially providers could do so, but I'm sure the answer to Alderman Briscoe's question will allay those concerns that I have, albeit I appreciate it's commercial in confidence. But look, I don't have any real concerns with the motion. It was fascinating in regards to point 4, which I hear from when it was introduced was added as part of discussion. I'm not sure I completely... I think I can understand that there is an inequity in regards to that is faster than that, and so why is that the case? But I guess also bikes are allowed to go faster than e-scooters and cars are allowed to go faster than e-scooters. So look, to my mind, I don't see a concern there, but I don't have an issue with being part of the motion. Look, as far as I can see it, I'm supportive of it, and I was supportive of the amendment as well. So, but look, I think the officers have done a good job in this regard. The trial has a way to go, and it's definitely not necessarily a fait accompli that they're going to be approved at the end of that. But I think this forms part of the body of work, and there is an education part to that. And I think riders are generally getting better, and people are getting better at using them, and also being used to them being used around them in the city. Thanks.
Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. There was a good discussion about this in committee the other week. And look, I think it's important to say I'm a supporter of the scooter program. I use them when it's convenient for me. But I think it is also at the same time very important that if these are going to continue being used in the city, it needs to be done in a way that's sustainable and addresses the issues that we're having during this trial. That's the whole reason that we undertaking the trial in the first place, and we didn't just go into it, for good. The one issue that I've had, and I've raised this in committee, is I know at the time, and this was discussed, the police took a stance of an educative approach rather than an enforcement approach. And for the early months of that, I think that's reasonable. I think since that period of time, there's been, I think, little enforcement. I think there was some statistics being provided. My view is the majority of people who wear seatbelts do so because they understand that if you get caught driving without a seatbelt, you get booked. Obviously, there's an important safety element there, but I think the motivating factor for most people is, same with speed limits, is you do it or you get booked. With scooters, there isn't that expectation of that risk at the moment. You drive around, I work down in Salamanca, and I'm known to frequent the place on evenings on Friday and Saturday nights. You see people there, as has been said, riding without helmets. You see people doubling up on the scooters, sometimes both people without helmets. And you definitely see people riding those things under the influence. And I think it's safe to say that if I was a police officer driving through the waterfront at midnight on a Saturday night and I saw somebody on a scooter, I would just I think if you made the assumption that if you made the assumption that they were under the influence of alcohol and you pulled them over, I reckon 9 times out of 10 you'll probably be correct. The issue of the helmets, I think one issue that I've had a huge bugbear about is, for those that have used it, you log on to one of those apps, and both providers are the same. You log on and it asks you, do you want to unlock the helmet or did you bring your own helmet? The whole point of these scooters is the convenience of not having to bring your own scooter with you. I don't think I've ever seen a single person riding on one of those scooters bringing their own helmet with them. Have you? I think if you made the unlocking of the scooter conditional upon you actually removing the helmet from the holder, you would reduce 80% of instances of people riding without a helmet. I think it's such a vast minority. You might say not anybody, Deputy, but I think it's such a vast minority of people that actually would bring their own helmets. If you want to make sure people are wearing their helmets, make it conditional on actually using the scooter. At the end of the day, I think perhaps there's more that we could do, perhaps there's more the police could do, and there could also be more that the scooter companies could do. I think all parties are looking at this in good faith, and I think Neuron and Beam, I think, want this to be a sustainable program as well. Otherwise, it'll be a one-year experiment that gets terminated, doesn't really suit their business model. But I think the issue is, and I think most people do the right thing here, it's that there's a minority of people that aren't using these things the right way because they haven't got a motivating factor to use it the right way. For a lot of people, it's easier to just get off the scooter and wherever you leave it, because it's not my scooter and what's anybody going to do about it? And it's those minority of people that leave scooters in the footpaths that block it for people that have mobility issues or elderly Tasmanians. And they're the ones that we need to crack down on and enforce. But the majority of people, as has been said, I think as time's gone on, the general behaviour and use of these things has improved, and I think it'll continue to improve. I do think that it is important and critical that we do continue to...
30 seconds.
Can I ask for a minute extension, Lord Mayor?
Moved by Councillor Sherlock, seconded by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Extra minute.
Thank you. I think it's important that we do continue to hone this and improve this as we go through this trial, because the trial hasn't been perfect, and that's the reason why we have it. Is so when we do eventually decide if we're going to continue this or not, we've had all these learnings of this past year. But I think if we take the attitude that we're either against it or we're for it, and there's no in between, and there's no ability to be critical of how things currently are, we will only end up with a program that's not sustainable. And the second that we do have a serious incident, there'll be cause to stop the program altogether, and I don't think that benefits anybody. So I'll just re-emphasise all of that. As to the motion itself and what we heard in committee, I think as Part 4 says, we did hear some interesting commentary around the mobility scooters. issue being, I don't think anybody had an agenda there, but
30
it was,
seconds.
thank you, it was one of the only issues that was raised that hadn't already been covered, such as the helmets and people riding without, with doubling up and riding drunk. So there's possibly some inequity there. Perhaps there's good reason for it. Perhaps mobility scooters aren't best to be hooned around at 25 k's an hour. But I think it's definitely worth the Access Advisory Committee looking into. So I'll commend this, and I think there is definitely a lot more work that we can do to make this a good program, Lord Mayor.
Yes, just very quickly, Lord Mayor, I commend the officers on the work that they've done, and I'm really pleased. I also would concur that I think the behaviour has improved dramatically over time. One of the issues that hasn't improved, however, is the use of the footpaths to leave the scooters in everywhere. I witnessed a mother pushing her baby in a pram up Castro Esplanade. She was confronted by a scooter which completely blocked the footpath. She had to take the pram down the curb, onto the road, round the scooter, up the curb, back onto the footpath. Apart from exhausting her, it woke the baby up. The jolting the baby around, it was extremely dangerous. There was no way she could have got round the scooter. And that was it was the top of the footpath on the left-hand side as you're going up Castro Esplanade, Camden Road. So, and that's one example, and I'm sure there are dozens and dozens and dozens of not only disabled people, but mothers and fathers who are pushing babies and so on in transit, just simply can't get past them. So, other countries, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm very pleased that there was an amendment to mention parking, I think from Alderman Briscoe, because other countries have identified that there needs to be defined drop-off and pick-up points, particularly where it's not safe to leave for other users of footpaths for them to be left at random. So I do hope we look at that very carefully. I know we've spoken about our narrow footpaths at length, but I've seen examples, as I just cited, and I'm sure other people have seen examples where it's dangerous, it's unreasonable. This mother was exhausted. It's quite a steep hill going up Castro Esplanade, and to be confronted by this, she was just, I could just see the look on her face, and that shouldn't happen. And so if we can do something about that, that would be terrific. So I do hope our staff do focus on that, maybe have a look at other cities. I know the city of Helsinki, because I've read about it, now has very defined drop-off and pick-up areas, and they have fantastic, footpaths, and yet they've found a need to do this because of the fact that these things are being left every which way, blocking off even wide footpaths in some cases. So let's have a look at that, see whether we can improve the behaviour about where these things are left.
Alderman Thomas.
Yes, I won't be seeking extra time. I'd like to. I'm an advocate for this as another form of mobility. I think there's some. I was waiting for the chair to jump in here, but he didn't. My understanding is that at least one of the companies, maybe both, have a process whereby they can determine if the scooter has been left appropriately, and if you do two, good, chair, that's it. And if you actually have two instances in which you've illegally parked or improperly parked, you're banned. You actually get. So in other words, I agree with you, Alderman Sexton, that going down Sandy Bay Road and mobility, people with having to take, motorised wheelchair because they've got a disability, it's horrendous. And it really is a complication for our city and for this trial. But I believe there is a two strikes and you're out in terms of maybe this can come back when you do your sum up. But I'm pretty sure that's the case. So that issue is appropriately handled or meant to be handled. The helmets, I agree with Alderman Barakis. This is one of the greatest problems, I think, that the helmets just, I see flagrant examples all the time of the helmets not being used, and it's just got to be fixed. But in terms of one of the questions earlier in the debate, Alderman Briscoe, will this report come back during the sitting during this council? It's a 12-month trial, and it didn't start, I don't think, till December. So how on earth are we going to get a debate? We're going to get a report back before the end of this?
I think that's a question for the CEO, but I think it might be an interim report. Is that?
Oh, just an interim report, but you're not going to be happy with that. We're going to want the real one. So that's an interim report coming back, Chair, isn't it?
That's That's correct, Lord Mayor. It would be a progress report.
I'd like to think that, and just finishing up, I think the scooters as an element of an additional alternative means of transport are great for our city. I think that things like the speed, the helmet, I think if we don't get this helmet thing sorted out, and the throwing of them all over the footpath, then I think it's going to be difficult to get this trial through this council. I would suggest that the helmet issue is a critical one. The double dinking, which still happens, I know, Alderman Barakis, that's improved, but there's still a long way to go. But I think ultimately, if we can crunch these issues, then we have a very successful tool at our hands.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I think it's you know, these points about riding without a helmet or riding under the influence of alcohol are covered by the law, you know, and whilst that's, I take the point that it's not necessarily policed to get the people who are doing this, it's still covered by the law. So I think sometimes we think that we've got the jurisdiction to look after these things, but people have their own level of responsibility to be, and the law needs to be enforced. So I won't talk much more about that. I just have a question, and perhaps the Chair can help me with this. In part one of the motion, we're talking about viability of creating mixed-use micro-mobility lanes in inner-city corridors. Is that with bike lanes, as part of bike lanes, or because it's just talking about micro-mobility lanes? Do you know the answer to that?
No, I'm assuming, sorry, through you, Chair, I'm assuming that will come forward. Looking at more ways to create mixed-use micro-mobility lanes in inner-city corridors. I think that's a natural progression of all this as we go forward, when we start thinking more seriously about bike lanes and where we put them, and shared lanes as well, so bikes, scooters and mobility scooters. It's just the normal progress, I think, but how we accelerate it, you know, that's up to the next round of reports.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think I really commend the officers for the community engagement and the great breadth of work on this issue of e-scooters. I think it is, as Alderman Thomas and others have said, a really important part of addressing climate change issues. I don't know if you said that, but you know, that micro-mobility is really important ways, and we're getting a lot of data back in relation to where we need to improve footpaths, ingress to particular areas, and which are the most popular routes, so how we can improve that. And it is about mitigating risk in anything that we do, you know, like we have to weigh things up as councillors. How do we engage with the community so that older members of the community or others may not feel so vulnerable, and we've certainly, and Alderman Barakis has been at the Access Advisory Committees where issues of, well, you know, having a horn signal might be okay for some people, but it's not okay for people who are hearing impaired if something's coming up behind them. So making sure that there are ways that are addressing these things, mitigating the risk, rather than saying, okay, we've got a problem here, let's just forget about the trial. Let's make it better. And I think there has been quite a lot of goodwill by the companies to reduce the risks, to address some of those risks, and I'm really pleased about that. And I'd just be cautious, although I sort of supported the amendment, this is a trial across our municipality, which I think is a fantastic thing. You know, like, it means that instead of just using scooters within the city, but, you know, the CBD, I don't know if any other city, and I would be happily corrected, that uses it right across their municipality, you know, for a municipality our size. So I think that's a really good strength, and getting people to park better, but not necessarily, you know, on Forest Avenue or Forest Road. Where do they park in a dedicated parking zone, and they still have to walk halfway up the hill. So, you know, like that kind of defeats the purpose. So I think there has to be some sort of balance to ensure that those narrower footpaths that Alderman Sexton talked about aren't scattered or littered with scooters. But again, just keeping that education going, keeping that information going back to the companies and also back to council where it needs to do. So really pleased with this motion, and I look forward to further reports and information.
Would you like to sum up, Chair?
Just briefly, just a couple of points. Can I point out the council webpage on e-scooters? So if you're looking for any information or contact numbers for people, you know, to direct people to, then I'd really recommend that they go to that page. And if all the councillors and aldermen are familiar with that page, it'll, you know, there's all sorts of information there. With regard to parking on the footpath, that is still an issue. I had 6 scooters today parked outside a bakery. I just assumed in my mind, I read this is a mob of hipsters from Melbourne using our scooters who'd gone to the bakery for lunch, and they just parked their scooters on the footpath everywhere. And I had to walk on the road, and it was difficult walking on the road because there was too many cars. So the solution really, for the parking issues, I see that one car space would probably host 10 scooters. And dare I say, should we be considering parking spaces in the city for scooters in particular car parking areas? So, you know, that might be a way of solving this. These are dedicated car parks set aside for 10, 12, 15 scooters. The other point I was going to make is the scooters are getting smarter as well. So there's AI in the scooters. So like Alderman Thomas pointed out, the scooter is learning where it's parked and they speak to each other. They're like the Borg, you know, they have this collective consciousness and they speak to each other, and they're able to communicate to the people who are riding them, don't park here, you know. And like you said, they get the warning from the scooter, and then potentially they might even get barred for a couple of weeks, and then if they're, you know, recidivists, they might get kicked off the system. So there is solutions to these things, but I think the main one for me would be, you know, finding the appropriate car parking spaces where we can park lots of them off the road, and so they're not on the footpath, because it was a bit annoying for me today as well, having to skip over 6 scooters while there were 3 people converging on the same space. So I do get it, I do see it as a problem, but it's something we can overcome and that we'll get better at. And overall, I think the trial has been really successful. The scooter companies are working really hard to resolve the issues. Council has a great web page where you can find all the content you need, and it's easy to report bad behaviour to the scooter companies or to give feedback, or, you know, good feedback as well if you so choose. But I do think there's been a lot of good benefits of getting people out of their cars onto scooters, and it's created another way of getting around Hobart, and I think it's been a successful trial so far, and I look forward to the completion of it. So we get the final report at some point. But I commend the recommendations here. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 14, Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Item 14, fees and charges.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Lord Mayor, this was put to a committee meeting, a special committee meeting at 4:15 today, where there was predominantly a majority of the elected members there, besides a couple. And discuss the fees and charges, and that the existing fees and charges relating to food truck permits remain as they were in 21-22, and the officers prepare a report considering separate fees for residential planning applications for developments costing between $200,001 and $600,000. That was brought up by Alderman Barakis on the basis that if we're seeking to promote affordable housing, maybe we should have a report on having a different fee structure for lower end housing development. I think it's a very, very good idea. And the officers are going to bring back some information on some other reports as well, and also move.
Discussion. Councillor, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We'll try and get through this without having to ask for extra time. Yeah, look, just on, I'm supportive of this. I know there was some talks about food truck permits. I think the majority of us, I think we're all on the same page on that. And yeah, look, as to part 2, which was brought upon by myself, I think we had a large number of, for those that weren't in the committee at the time, we had a large, we had increases across the board in development application permits, and there was no differentiation between commercial permits or residential permits, and we had increases in the price bracket of between $200,000 and $600,000, which is specifically the price where you would find those applications that would be for affordable housing. I think if we want to incentivise the development of more affordable housing, we should signal that in our fee structure. And I think it's a good idea that we separate that out, and maybe not tonight, but that's why we'll be getting a report. Consider that, and if that would be a good way for us to properly incentivise and signal to the developers and property owners and those wishing to build in the city that this is something that we want to see more of, and hopefully that will result in better outcomes for the city. So I'll commend the entire motion, and especially part 2, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I think looking through, I think it was a good move by the CEO to present all the fees together, because I had to recall previous years that it was all from each different committees, and I did think it was consolidated at some point, but basically we had all these motions from every committee about their fees. So I think it's a good idea having it all together, and you can scan through them all. Most of them only got up $1 or $2, and that's probably good for the ratepayers. I am intrigued by the dangerous dogs one though. That if anyone out there, or if all 30 people who are watching the tube now, if you've got a dangerous dog or about to get a dangerous dog, you've got a few days, maybe 2 weeks, to get your dog registered before the 30th of June, because the fee will go up $640. Now, question I'd like to ask through you, Chair, to the appropriate director, and Mr. Doyle might be able to answer it. How many dangerous dogs have we got in the city?
Lord Mayor, I'm not sure if Mr. Noy is online. I think he is.
Yes, Mr. Noy, would you like to answer
Yeah,
the question?
look, I don't have a number available to me at the moment, but happy to take that one on notice.
Seems all my questions are on notice this time. I did bring up in the committee about the fees for lanes, when you hire lanes in the aquatic centre, where there could be some inconsistency when a group or an individual hires a lane, the 50 metres versus the 25 metre diving pool, and it has an impact, and that will be sorted out operationally. I generally think that the fees are a reasonable increase. They're not unreasonable, except maybe for the dangerous dog one, but the explanation was that that was a full fee recovery, and I think that's appropriate for people who wish to have dangerous dogs.
Further discussion? Would you like to sum up, Chair? Alderman Zirkle.
No, thanks, Lord Mayor. I think it's been said.
I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously.
No.
Oh, was there a no? No. Okay.
No.
That was conversation.
So carried unanimously. That brings to a close our open portion of our meeting. Moved Deputy, seconded by Councillor Sherlock, that we move into the close. All those